Hi, everybody. Good morning. It's Patty Widget, Fast Eviction Service, Widget's Way. Yeah, I got more titles today than I care to have. Want to open up our meeting today. We're going to be going over understanding the terms of your written rental agreement and some bad business practices we want to avoid. And I'll give you guys the why too, so you understand where this information is coming from. Hopefully that helps tie it all together and make a little more sense of things. Sorry, I'm trying to maneuver things on this desk so I have a little bit more room. So before we get started, I'm going to talk to you guys about current changes in the legislation and what we're looking at, yada, yada, yada. I never thought in a million years that our government would be able to rewrite our written rental agreements as to when the rent's due. I never, ever thought that we'd be dealing with something on this level. And from what I see in the horizon, and I'm not trying to be scary to anybody, I'm just trying to get you guys to pay attention to what I'm telling you. It's going to get worse before it gets better. I've been saying that all along. It looks like Governor Gavin Newsom is steering towards Senate Bill number 91. So it's SB 91. It's also 40 pages long, has a lot of rules in it regarding retaliation, rent increases, things like that. So got a lot of moving parts, got a lot of legalities, and unfortunately a lot more restrictions for us owners. I'll leave my statement at that. Let's see what happens when the law passes and we'll take it from there. But I'm trying to brace you for impact, for lack of a better way to explain it. Hootie has attached a rental agreement for you guys to look at, thanks to our good friends over at AGLA. We're borrowing their written rental agreement. I'm going to tell you guys right now, AGLA is the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. I did not invite them today. Usually I do when I do something with their documents, but I'm going to let you know right now, if you're not a member with them, you may want to consider being a member with them. We're going over their lease document today, so it kind of puts in perspective what kind of documents you would get with them. But more importantly, you need to know that part of your membership dues go to help fight legislation and fight these Senate bills and Assembly bills. And they really are a great voice for us as landlords. They're also involved in several class action lawsuits against the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, and I have no doubt they're going to attack the state with the new Senate bill. With all of that being said, and I borrowed somebody's office that isn't here today, forgive me, because my desk is a mess. Just wanted to make sure that you knew that AGLA is out there actually fighting for us. Their advocate groups are fighting for us. And although we hear these new laws, we're like, no, they're so restrictive. If you really do the research on them, you usually find out that they were a lot worse. And because of legislation, lobbying, and fighting for us, what we're seeing is that what we're calling so horrible and terrible was actually much worse until those advocate groups got in and really went to bat for us. So although sometimes it doesn't seem like anyone is fighting for us, please know that there are a lot of apartment associations out there that participate with the PAC, and they actually do a really good job in fighting in legislation and fighting for our rights as landlords. I know it doesn't seem like it, but let me just say this and you let it resonate. These bills that are passing, these rules that are passing, they would have been much more stringent and much more restrictive to landlords if the PAC and the lobbyists from Sacramento didn't get involved. So I encourage you to please talk more with them. Contact AGLA is a big advocate group in the greater Los Angeles area, and their graphics cover LA County, Ventura County, and San Bernardino County. So they cover a vast area as well. So just think about that when you're looking for resources, documents, things of that nature. I always try to support somebody that supports us rather than somebody that just sells us documents for their own profit. Make sense? I'm going to teach this class very openly today. We have a small amount of people. I see that Hootie put a link in there for you guys to download the sample rental agreement. that we're going to be going over today, just so you guys have a better understanding of basically what those terms mean. So it is in the Google Drive, or a Google Drive down there at the bottom. I see it flashing, telling me that it's there. So before we get started, I just want to know, does anybody have any questions other than, why do they keep making all these laws protecting the tenants and nothing for us owners? Because some things never change, and we are occupied 78%, and I need to get this out of my pocket so I can sit more comfortably. Sorry, it's been a busy morning. Okay. So I don't see any questions come through. Hootie, do we have anything, or should I get right on it?
Go ahead and get started.
Okay, so just want to talk to you guys about the difference, first of all, between a written rental agreement and an oral agreement, okay? One is in writing and one is done verbally. So I got to be careful what I say now, because there's so many laws protecting tenants. I don't want to invite one of you to come live with me on accident. Hootie, April's having trouble downloading the sample document. I don't know if you saw that. If you say to your friend, I know you're having trouble in your relationship, whatever it may be, don't worry about it. You can come stay with me for a while. I just made a verbal agreement to rent to them. They can come live in my house. Okay. They now have rights. Okay. See how that worked? All I did was invite them to come stay with me, but I didn't talk about time and I didn't talk about money. So that would be considered a tenancy at will. It's still a tenancy. So you want to be really careful when you're inviting people to come stay with you, because their life isn't so great right now. You may be creating a verbal rental agreement. Just say it. So definitely something to think about and consider. Sorry, people are calling me and I'm trying to get them declined really quickly. I'm using my cell phone today. So let's first talk about an oral agreement. Okay, Hootie's giving you instructions at the bottom. God love him. Let's talk about your oral rental agreement, a verbal agreement. They're the same, okay? Anytime that you don't have a written rental agreement, and a written rental agreement has to have certain things to be considered a written rental agreement. It has to have the address of the property. It has to have both parties' names. It has to be signed by both parties. So if you gave them a lease, went to the property, talked to them, got distracted, they never signed it, and now you can't get them to sign it, you have an oral agreement. See how that worked? It's very important that you get all your signatures. I call them your ducks. You got to have all your ducks in a row, all your signatures everywhere that they're required. I'll talk to you about the move-in process just a little bit, but more importantly, I wanted to talk to you guys about agreements. So when you have a verbal agreement, remember, your rental agreement is the rules of which you agreed to rent them to and they agreed to rent from you. Whether on an oral agreement, you don't have that. Basically, they can stay there. They have tenants' rights, and the rules they have to follow are city, state, county, federal, yada, yada. Does that make sense? So you guys can only enforce the city, the county, the federal, and the state laws. Other than that, you can't enforce things like a late fee, damages to the property, utilities, etc. I mean, it's just going to be extremely difficult for you to enforce things because you don't have an agreement in writing. So always better to have your agreement in writing. We'll talk a little bit today about a term versus a month to month. And you guys got to remember, tomato, tomato, okay? There's lots of verbiage out there. It means the same thing. So an oral agreement, a verbal agreement, all means you don't have a written contract, okay? A rental agreement, a lease, or a month to month all mean you have a written contract, okay? So I hope everybody understands the difference between the two and the importance of having it documented in writing. Even if you're renting to a family member, you want to define what the rules are at hello. Recently, I sold my biggest investment property, which happened to be my primary residence. And rather than go kick tenants, thank you, April, I'm glad you got it. I've been stalling just to make sure everybody gets it. Sorry, squirrel, butterfly, whatever you want to call it, little blonde moment there. But just want to make sure you guys all understand the importance of a written rental agreement. Sold my primary residence and a couple of my investment properties. And rather than go kick a tenant out that's paying the rent for just me and my dog, I decided that I would go rent a room from my son. He just bought a house. It's a big house. It's just him there. So my dog and I needed a place to go. And rather than go kick a tenant out that's paying me money, it made more sense to go rent a room from him. Fine, no problem. I have a written rental agreement with my own son. Why? I know better. So does he. So just saying, even if you're renting to family, even if you're renting to friends, even if you're letting them stay with you for a month, you need to have that agreement in writing with those terms of what the rules are. It makes it very difficult to enforce things if we don't have any rules. Make sense? So trying to get you in that mindset of in writing versus an oral agreement. An oral agreement, you have unauthorized people there, prove it. You don't have an agreement, you have an oral agreement. You have a late fee you want to charge, you can't. You don't have an agreement in writing. They have to follow city laws, governmental laws, things like that. That's it. So it makes it extremely challenging and extremely difficult for you as a landlord to enforce terms of verbal contract and oral contract. It doesn't work. Okay. You gotta have it in writing. It's the nicest way I could say it. And I'll teach you guys a little trick of mine. It's super simple, easy. Like somebody told me yesterday, just use KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. I like that. So I always write in blue ink. I only buy blue pens, and people ask me all the time, why blue? When you get into court, you are required to bring your original documents. Sometimes it's really hard to figure out what's an original and what's a copy. And we do the finger trick where we flip the paper over and rub the back and see if we can fill that indentation of a signature. Use blue ink. Super simple, right? If we use blue ink and we make a copy doesn't go in blue. So we now know which one's the original and which one's copy. It keeps it very simple. And I like things simple. We have enough complexity in our lives. We don't need to add to it, okay? So got through verbal agreement versus a written agreement. Very important that people understand the difference because they call the law firm all the time. They're breaking the rules. What rules? They have more people than they're supposed to. What people? You don't have a written agreement. You can't enforce things. You can't get mad at them for the laundry or the this or the that because there are no rules. Okay. Just city, state, county, federal. Those are the only rules that govern them. So quickly, let's talk about the terms of a term agreement or a lease, if you will, which is locked in for a period of time versus a month to month. There's many benefits to the landlord for having a month to month contract versus having a term contract. And I'm going to be careful what I say here because I do understand that we have people here from LA City, LARSO, LA County. And the reason I'm emphasizing that is if it has LA in it, you probably have certain rules you have to follow. The rest of the country or the rest of the state, sorry, not as much. We see heavy restrictions in the city of San Diego and heavier restrictions in the city of Los Angeles being the most restrictive here locally in Southern California. And then the county of LA currently has some restrictions that the rest of the state doesn't have. So they are a little bit more aggressive in controlling what we can and can't do. So one of the things is in LA, the original rental agreement controls. Okay, so as long as you have a signed agreement and everybody signs and all parties agree, that's fine. But if you're going through and you want to change the rules or you want to change something or make an insurance, a requirement that the tenant has insurance, you may not be able to impose that in LA. In LA, from what I remember speaking with the attorney, they said there's only a few things that we could change. And it not be a problem. One would be your annual rent increase. One would be your annual deposit increase. And yes, I did say that if you're raising the rent, you want to raise the deposit as well. Otherwise, it just sits there. We need to make that bigger too. You don't want to have somebody in your property for 20 years and their deposit's $400. What are you going to do with that? Okay. So as you're raising rents, you want to raise deposits. So those are things you can do in LA City, LARSO, rent control areas. The other thing that you can do is mandated disclosures. So I'll give you an example, lead-based paint. We recently had a mandated disclosure regarding bed bugs where we had to notify all the tenants of bed bugs. Mandated means it's required by law. So with that being said, those changes are some of the only changes you can do in LA County. The other, or I'm sorry, LA City. The other one you can change without tenant approval is your attorney's fees clause. Okay, so, and we're going to talk about attorney's fees clause today. So let me get there. We got a lot to talk about, a lot to go over. As far as a term versus a month to month, there's pros and cons, obviously. And the landlord, and I am one, so I know how we all think, you guys, okay? Our thinking is lock them in for a year, lock them in. We want to lock them in because we don't want to be flipping and turning that unit with new carpet and new paint every 2 months or every 6 months. And then it just doesn't become as profitable. However, you also can't change the rules. So if you sign a 1-year lease contract with someone, everything's all good and happy-go-lucky, and they sign and move in, and you forgot to add a late fee, and you forgot to put this on your contract, and you forgot to put that, you really can't enforce any of that until the contract expires a year later or 6 months later, however you're doing a term. We're also seeing that with AB 1482, which is the statewide rent control initiative. I'm sorry, you guys, it's really cold in this office. So bear with me, I'm getting a little chilly. With 1482, the statewide rent control initiative, it controls how we terminate tenancy, and that has a lot to do with how long the tenants lived there. And we have to pay relocation fees if they've been there longer than 12 months and haven't brought in any roommates. With that being said, why are we signing up at hello, hi, I'm your new landlord, to pay them 1 month's rent to get out if they live there for 12 months or longer? When you put them in a 1-year contract, you are signing up to pay them 1 month's rent when they vacate. That's what you're doing. So we're seeing a lot of corporate America, a lot of the high dollar management companies refrain from using 1-year lease contracts, and they're either using a month to month, or they're giving them a 3-month contract to start or a 6-month contract to start, and then letting it go month to month thereafter. When I asked the attorney why, the response came out pretty simple and clear. If they've been living there 11 months and you're deciding you don't like them, you could potentially give them a 30-day notice to terminate the tenancy and be done with them, and not have to pay them the relocation fees. What I just said is non-COVID, okay? So in a normal life without this pandemic on us, that is normally how that would be handled. The reason that I threw that in is we all know COVID has brought quite a bit of restrictions, controls, and frustrations to us as landlords. And I'll try to say that nicely and not add my personal view, because remember, I am a landlord. I have skin in the game, and I know how bad it can suck sometimes. I have had tenants that were affected by COVID. I didn't get my rent when I was supposed to. I played nice. I kept that landlord-tenant balance nice. And currently, knock on wood, I am getting my rent on time every month, which is nice. I don't have to chase it. I don't have to worry about it. And I'm always concerned because I have skin in the game. I get it, you know? So watch those terms. It can give you, the landlord, a false sense of security. It's relatively easy for a tenant to get out of a lease contract. There's a few different ways they can do that without getting into a whole lot of detail. But think about it this way. We can't make them live there. We can't. And in the event they break the lease, then we have to find a new tenant, and unless we have a lease break fee, and then we have to re-rent the property as quickly as possible. We have to be due diligent in that re-rental process so that we're not dragging it out. We actually have to lower the rent to prove that we're trying to find a new tenant. I mean, it gets a little challenging at times. So talk to your legal counsel. I can't give you legal advice. I am a lot of things, but I am not an attorney. Everything that I'm going to teach you today is based on my experience and knowledge in the field. And if I have to, I do have the capability to go out and get one of the attorneys as long as they're not in trial. And I say that, and you're like, what do you mean they're in trial? They're in your office. A lot of trials, because of COVID right now, just so you guys know, are being held telephonically. So if you get called into trial, chances are currently you'll get a phone number, a PIN number, a passcode. You call in, you sit through a round robin. Sometimes you're put on hold. Sometimes you get to listen to everybody else's things that are going on in the courtroom. Sometimes you're just lost in space until it's your turn. So definitely something that we need to know. Times are changing. We got to change with them. We do not want to be at the airport waiting for our ship to come in. So know that they are doing telephonic appearances for court right now because of COVID, and that in itself brings additional challenges to us. Like we needed more. Okay, just saying. Let me see. I have lots of notes here because I want to make sure I'm very thorough with you guys. We talked about a lease break fee briefly, and now we're going to get started in understanding the terms of your rental agreement. If everybody's ready to get started, I hope so. Let me just see what we got here. Okay, I'm talking. Unless anybody has a question, I'm going to move on. Let me know. So number one of AGLA's rental agreement is, and I hope everybody's got this downloaded, this is their lease agreement. Things that I could point out to you. Number one, you want to fill out the blanks that are on here. It's pretty self-explanatory on what you're putting, what you're charging, but we're going to talk about the charges as we go through this and make sure that you understand what the law is so that you're not breaking the law before you even have them sign the document. Okay, just trying to help you here. So you'll see the very first thing on here is owner and renter agree that the renter's performance and compliance with each one of the terms contained in this lease agreement with the owner or house rules or pool rules, which were then incorporated herein, meaning they're attached to this document, shall constitute a renter's right to occupy the premises. Once you hand them this, they have a right to occupy the premises. Once you tell them they are approved, they have a right to occupy the premises. Should I add all adults living in the unit? Absolutely. So what I do is every older must be listed as a leasee on the rental contract. Every once in a while, we get someone that is over 18, but they're a disabled adult. You can't force a disabled adult to sign. Don't even try to do that. So, okay, we'll get there, Nina. I'm with you. Don't put the owner's name on there. Yeah, we want the owner's name on the rental agreement. So every once in a while we get a disabled adult. We want to make sure that we're not asking them to sign. We can list them as an additional occupant, but a lot of times if you have a disabled adult, there is someone else, a caregiver, usually it's a family member, but lots of moving pieces in this business, you guys. So my tip and trick to you is if they have a power of attorney, they're allowed to sign on their behalf. And here's just me talking to you out loud. If they don't have a job and they don't have any income other than Social Security, disability, things of that nature, you can't touch that in a judgment anyway. You can't garnish those wages. You can't get that money. So if they're disabled, it isn't necessarily going to benefit you in the long run if you're trying to sue or get a money judgment in small claims or something along those lines if you can't go after those funds. So I see a couple of questions. Let me get them. Patty, don't put an owner's name on leases. I don't put owner's name on leases and sign as owner's agent. Best practices or not. I'll tell you why in just a minute that I don't think that's a good practice. They are college students, not disabled. I understand that. Sometimes we have disabled adults, though. We really do, truly. And I'm just trying to help make sure that you don't set yourself up for failure, especially because people with disabilities are class in the federal level. So you want to make sure you're for a lawsuit or a fair housing violation, let alone an ADA case, okay? So let me jump really quickly to Nina. Attorney Starry, my audio cut out when I first, what does this say? Hold on. We're talking about putting an owner's name on a lease for the question. So I always list the owner because that is the owner of record. Okay. So listing the owner of record is who you want to list as the owner of the property. If you're dealing with a contract that's lessor and lessee, you want to list the owner of the property. You, as a property management company, can sign that document because you are an agent for the owner. Okay? Agent for the owner, but you don't want to put yourself as the lessor or as the owner on the rental agreement. The reason being is you're telling them that if anything's wrong and they need to file a lawsuit, this is who they need to sue, the owner. You don't want to be named in a lawsuit. You don't. So it's a good way to put yourself in the position that you're in. You're an agent for the owner and you don't have any ownership rights in the property in general. So it's just another way for you to protect you, especially if you're running a property management company. It's a much better business practice to have the owner's name there. If it's a trust, then list the name of the trust. If it's an LLC, list the name of the LLC. Whatever is on title is what I would put on my rental agreement as far as the owner of record goes. I know owners want to hide, okay? I know they don't want to easily be found, but the reality is they're easily found. Welcome to running a title report. It's public record. So as nicely as I tell my owners, you can run, but you can't hide. That's why you hired me. It's line of defense through me and not through you. And that's what you hired me for. But in order to best protect you, I need to put your name here because you're the owner of record, not me. So can be a little bit challenging getting them to understand why their name's there, but their name's on title. That makes sense as long as owner does not have to sign. I don't want any contact between owner and tenants. I couldn't agree with you more. I don't want and the owners don't want contact with the tenants. That's why they hired us in the first place. So it's just another way for us to protect ourselves. If we were to write their ABC Property Management Company as the owner of record and the tenant was to take their rental agreement in and hand it to an attorney and say, I want to sue my landlord, who do you think they're going to sue? The owner on title or ABC Property Management Company? They're going to sue ABC Property Management Company because your name's on there as the owner of record. Don't sign yourself up for any lawsuits, you guys. They're not fun. Just saying. And if you like them, we need to have a whole nother conversation. Okay, so let's continue moving along here as long as we're all on the same page. So owners, pretty simple. Renters, pretty simple. Premises, that would be the street address. Remember this, if you don't have an address on their contract, you don't have a contract. It's that simple. If the court doesn't know what address you're referencing, then it doesn't reference a property. See how that worked? Okay. Remember I said in the beginning, rental agreements have to have some key factors to them. Having the address listed on the rental agreement is absolutely one of them. So we want to make sure we're doing that. So this is a term and it says from and including and to and including. So that would be your start date and your end date, simply said. And you could make that just 1 month if you wanted to. You could give someone a 1 month term, 30 days, and then it automatically goes to a month thereafter. So just some things to think about, okay? So the rent start date would be the day that they're moving in. Okay, I always prorate I take the first month's rent in full and I prorate the second month as a better business practice, because if they never give me a dime for the prorate, at least I got a full month's rent, which should be enough money for me to start the eviction against them. So it's just a policy and procedure that I use to help make sure I have enough assets in the account to cover any legal expenses should I not get a dime out of them. Okay, just saying. So I usually take the first month's rent in full and then I prorate the second month. Maximum occupancy in persons. We're going to talk about this, okay? You guys please pay attention. everybody's going to tell you, and you're going to hear a lot, oh, the industry standard is 2 per bedroom plus 1 on the couch. You'll hear it all day long and twice on Sundays. That's the industry standard. Is that the law? Because the industry standards are not the law, and you cannot enforce them unless you put the legal aspects behind it. So I'm going to tell you guys what the law says, and then I'm going to watch you all cringe. Sorry. The law says that you can have 9 persons for every 690 square feet. 9 people in a studio apartment? Holy cannoli, that's a lot. So in order for you to enforce or be able to enforce an occupancy limit, you need to have it both on your rental agreement and in your criteria, okay? So, and please take note how it's maximum blank persons. We don't care how old they are. Stop defining adults and children. Children are a protected class. They are actually residents from within your unit. They're not children. They're not kids. They're not playing, okay? Stay away from those words. They're pet peeves of mine. They're additional occupants. They're people. Some of them are little, some of them are big, some of them are old, some of them are young. If you guys haven't been paying attention to fair housing, here's what I could tell you. You can't discriminate for another human being for any reason at all whatsoever. With that being said, stop defining their age by calling them children or minors. You're poking at that bear that's a protected class. So just use the word maximum occupancy, maximum amount of persons. Okay, doesn't matter how old they are. That's most human bodies you can put in that unit. So industry standard and the law, 2 totally different things. We want to make sure that we're implementing those properly to best protect ourselves. Next one is B. Oh, and I'm going across. Maybe I shouldn't do that, but play with me, okay? So we have the rent per month. That is where you're going to put what the rent is. If it's $3,000 a month, then that's what we're going to put there is $3,000. The day the rent is due. Most people use the first and do a prorate. I've always used that business practice of rents due on the first. It just makes it easier. If you're managing, and Nina can vouch for me on this one, I'm sure, if you're managing 300 doors, okay, in a management company scenario, and everybody's rent is due on a different day, how are you going to function? How are you going to keep track of whose rent is due when? You can't hear me. Do you have me muted? Can anybody else hear me? Because I don't have me muted. Hootie, Margot can't hear us. Is there any reason for that?
No, everything seems to
Turn
be
up your
fine.
volume. Okay, April says she can hear me. I know there's a bit of a delay, so I'm sorry. And just so you guys know, Hootie, this will go up on the website later so they can rewatch it. Is that correct?
Yes, we'll send you a link.
Okay, perfect. So if you're missing anything due to technical problems, he will take good care of you, and we'll put that up and get you a link so that you can rewatch, okay? Because no problem, thank you. Maximum occupancy, you're not clear. State law says that it's 9 persons for every 690 square feet. That is the max occupancy. That is the law. So you want to implement a maximum occupancy both on your rental criteria and in your rental agreement, okay? And don't define children and adults. They're just people, okay? Doesn't matter how old they are. So you can implement the maximum persons for this property is 2, as long as it's in your rental criteria and on your, here, let me see if I can switch to data. Hootie, should I switch to data? Let's do that. Might do something weird really quick. Am I back now? I hope that's better. I switched to data. I'm off the Wi-Fi. Did that help? I hope. Okay. So max occupancy is whatever you make it. Know that if you don't put anything there, the state law applies. In order for you to enforce it, yes, I'm glad I helped. Okay. Wi-Fi is bad, right? It's good. If you're gonna do 2 persons plus 1, which is the industry standard, it's 2 per bedroom plus 1 for the couch, then you would write that. I would just put a maximum occupancy. If you have a 4-bedroom house and you only want 8 people living in that 4-bedroom house, then make your the maximum occupancy 8 persons. If you have a studio, stop using the word single. It's one of my pet peeves, okay? I'll give you an example. This unit is for single persons only. Did you just say somebody that's not married or somebody that's just one individual? Did you just make yourself susceptible to a discrimination lawsuit by using the word single? Yeah. So stop using single and use numbers. If the maximum occupancy is 1, then make it 1 person. If the maximum occupancy is going to be 4 persons, then make it 4 persons, okay? Don't define children or adult, just persons, okay? A number and persons. So it's not only single occupants can live in the studio. You just made it sound like they can't be married or divorced or separated, or that's discrimination. So we don't want to use the word single ever. We don't want to use the word children ever. And just so we're all on the same page, and we're doing my pet peeves now, the other one I can't stand is the word walk. It's discrimination for somebody that can't walk. So stop using walk-in closets or walking distance. Use oversized, spacious closet, close proximity to, nearby, okay? Be careful with some of those verbiages in there. Yes, you want to add a max persons clause. Yes. And I'm very familiar with car forms. Like I said, I'm a real estate broker. I don't necessarily prefer them in a property management transaction because there's too much room for error, human error, too many check boxes. One of your employees could miss a checkbox. You could miss a checkbox, and that checkbox could be detrimental to your business. So I like to use documents that spell things out a little bit easier in simple English. Good job, girl. Congratulations. I'm glad you're the owner. But if you miss one of those boxes, it can really cause you more harm than anything else. So just something to think about when you're doing a car forms contract. I always read them over at least 3 times before I implement them. And sometimes I even have someone else look it over because we know what we want it to say, but how it reads is totally different. It happens sometimes. So just want to be careful with that. And I'm not going to get into that any further. So we are talking about the day the rent is due. It's a better business practice, especially if you're managing multiple doors, to have the rent due on the 1st. It just makes your life easier. Additional or added occupant rent. I don't think that I would necessarily mess with that. You're inviting them to bring somebody else into the property by paying more rent. We may not want that. We may want to be able to terminate the tenancy because they are over their maximum occupancy. So by putting that in there, you could be putting the idea in their head that they could bring somebody else in for an additional $50 or $100 or whatever you put there. So in my opinion, I would put NA there. Okay. Returned. Oh, we didn't talk about late fees. Let's back up really quick and talk about late fees. Okay. You never want to do any late fee over 10%. Okay. It's unethical. 10% seems to be what everybody's gearing around, or they're going with a flat amount. So, and it's got to be less than 10%. So what we've seen traditionally is rents under $1,000 have a $75 late fee. Rents over $1,000 have a $100 late fee, and that's it. Some people put $15 for their late fee. Here's me talking to you, okay? You don't want to use it per day, because if you use it per day and it goes over 10%, it's not legal. So you want to give a flat amount. The whole idea of a late fee is just to discourage them from paying the rent late. So if your rent's $3,500, the maximum that you could put there would be $350. If you're going to charge me $350 for paying my rent late, I'm not going to be late. Okay. Hope everybody's following along with that. And that makes sense. Fair housing recognizes 6 to 7% as a late fee, and they don't consider that gouging. So just something to think about when you're calculating your late fee. You could put a percentage there, 7% of the monthly rent. Okay. That way, when you increase your rents, it automatically increases your late fee because it's based on a percentage of the monthly rent. If you put a flat dollar amount there and you increase the rent, you're no longer at 10% or the 7%. See how that worked? Okay. So you want to be careful with that. Just let me check my questions really quick and make sure I'm getting them all. Okay. When you use a per day, and I'll give you an example, some people use $15 a day on $1,000 rent. Well, in 10 days, their late fee is going to be $150. That's over 10%, and it's a problem. Don't make yourself susceptible to problems. Just put in a flat amount and charge them a flat fee. I like 10%. That's what I go with. Can late fees be charged right now during COVID? Absolutely not. And you're going to find out probably tomorrow, most likely, that you can't do rent increases either. It's considered retaliation. You might want to check out Senate Bill 91. Okay. It's really tying our hands. And I'm trying to keep a straight face and not flip out on what I really want to say about Senate Bill 91. Okay. But yes, Nina, it goes into detail that asking for a rent increase, I believe it said from March 1st. It's bureaucracy and bullshit at its finest, Geraldo. Sorry, it's what it is. Bureaucracy and bullshit. I believe what it states is you can't increase rents from March all the way until June. And mind you, this isn't passed yet, okay? Governor Newsom talked about what he was going to do, extending AB 3088. He's doing that through Senate Bill 91. We also have on the table Assembly Bill 15, I believe it's 15, yes. And they're gonna pick from one of those and they gotta do it tomorrow. I will tell you that AB 15 is much more restrictive and controlling than Senate Bill number 91. So if 91 passes and you guys are like, this is ludicrous, just know that it could have been much, much worse, much worse. They were talking about extending the 75%, I believe, until 2025. Okay, I'm going to get off of that now. So best business practices for a late fee would be 10% of the rent, 6% of the rent, 7% of the rent, whatever dollar amount or percentage you put there. If you increase rents down the road, it automatically increases the late fee. So you don't have to do a 30-day notice of change of terms of tenancy along with your notice of rent increase. So it's just an easier way to make your life easier by putting a percentage there rather than a fixed dollar amount. Return check charge. The law says you can charge $25 for the first NSF check fee and $35 for each one thereafter. If you don't leave an amount there, you can only charge whatever your bank charges you. So if you get charged $4 for a bounce check, that's what you get to charge the tenant. So you want to make sure you put a dollar amount in there. It cannot be more than $25 for the first occurrence and $35 for each occurrence thereafter, just so we're square. So that's the maximum. Owner's personal property. That's where you would put things like the refrigerator, washer, dryer, things that are there for the tenant to use. Well, we'll get into that when I get a little further because it's in my notes. But a lot of times a landlord will say, well, we'll let them use the washer and dryer. We don't want to deal with it, moving it or hauling it away. You need to make sure that you reflect in your rental agreement that it's there for the tenants to use and the owner will not maintain it. If you don't put that there and the washing machine breaks, guess who has to fix it? You do. So you want to make sure that it's there for them to use, but the owner will not maintain it, is the correct words. So in other words, if it breaks, the tenant can then go buy their own washing machine or dryer and then install it, obviously. I'm picking my words carefully. Some things are the owner's responsibility. That would be the oven and the stove, the garbage disposal, the dishwasher, things that are built-in appliances, like the over the stove microwave. That's a built-in. That anything built in is the owner's responsibility. Okay. Anything that isn't, and in California, the owner should provide an oven or a stove. And the reason that I state that is because it could be a habitability issue and a big nightmare. And we don't want tenants messing with installing stoves and touching gas lines and things of that nature. It's just too risky. Unless you have really good insurance. I'm kidding. So kidding. So personal property would be refrigerator, washer, dryer. I'm trying to think of something else that would be the owner's person. So I had an owner leave a tanning bed there once, and I'm like, this is a bad idea. I didn't want them to get burned, you know? Nicholas, what are you talking about? A water line for a refrigerator. I know exactly what you're talking about, because a lot of times tenants will connect the ice maker themselves and then they flood the unit. That would be when I called the tenant's insurance company for damages caused by them. Okay. A water softener, if it's built into the property, the owner has to maintain it. Simply said. Okay. Air conditioners, absolutely the owner's responsibility. And to get a list of what you would be responsible for, you could check out the Department of Consumer Affairs. They're going to tell you what habitability issues are. As far as window AC units, if the tenant installs a window AC unit, that would potentially be a modification to the property without written consent of the landlord and a reason for you to potentially cause an eviction with cause. See how that worked? Okay, I'm gonna move on unless you guys have more questions, and my foot's falling asleep. And again, it's freezing in this office. Okay, security deposit. I'm gonna take a quick minute to talk to you guys about security deposit. Stop defining what the security deposit is for. When you put that it's $1,000 for the security deposit and then $500 for the pet deposit, and then you have a $200 key deposit, and you have all these deposits, you need to understand as you're giving them a list and allocating what those deposits are for, at the end of all of this, you have to do that backwards. If they returned all the keys and the fobs to you, but they destroyed the carpet, you have to give them their key deposit back. If their pet didn't do any damage, but their son lit fire to the carpet, you have to give the pet deposit back. Make sense? Stop defining what the deposit's for and lump it all together and just call it an additional deposit. So if you have a pet, there's an additional deposit. See how that worked? We didn't define that it was for the pet, and it is a pet deposit. It's just an additional deposit would be required. So that's the verbiage we want to use. It's a better business practice in the long run, the short run, and all the way around. Okay, so and my nose itches. Maybe that means I'm going to get money. Keep it simple. You got it, Nick. Keep it simple, stupid. My daddy's favorite saying, keep it simple, stupid. So when you have a deposit, lump it all together, call it a deposit. If you're adding to the deposit, call it an additional deposit. But just define it as deposit. Don't define what it's for. That's where you get into trouble on the exit of the tenant. Okay. Animals. I don't like the way that's written, and it's just my opinion. There's a difference between animals and pets, and a service animal, emotional support animal, therapy animal, guide animal. See how they all have the word animal? And a pet is something you buy at the pet store on a whim, or it's your family treasure that you take with you everywhere you go. So animals, pets, two different things. I don't like the verbiage. Roll with it. That's where you define what animals they have, what you're allowing on the property. Okay. Owner paid utilities. If the owner pays for any utilities, you want to list that here. I'm going to give you guys a solid and a good business practice, so please pay attention. If the owner is paying the water bill, you might want to add the verbiage behind it, normal usage. That way, if your tenant is running a garden hose down the toilet and leaving all the sinks on, running the shower when they're not home because they're upset with you, you can make them responsible for the additional expenses there. See how that worked? Okay, so you want to make sure that when you're putting owner paid utilities and you're dealing with something that can change, like a water bill, that you're putting normal usage. It's going to be a little difficult for you to prove that for the last 6 months, their water bill's been $54 and now it's $5,000 this month.
On the laws and stuff for
You want to be able to show all of that. So we need to be cautious with the verbiage we're using, because we don't, the one thing you never want to do in this business, I've learned, is stand on your own feet. Okay, we have enough of the government doing that for us. We don't need any help. Okay, we want to make sure that we're protecting our asset to the best of our ability. Okay, so if the owner is paying utilities, and the reason I'm referencing water is that is something that can fluctuate based on usage, you want to put normal usage there. That way, like I said, if they get mad, they leave the water running, they have a running toilet and they don't tell you, they don't even realize the toilet's been running. We want to make those charges to be able to come back to them. So John, it sounds to me like you're going to do a sub-metering is how you do that. And we can go into detail with that as far as sub-metering. We use a RUBS system for that as well. So basically you take the water bill, divide it by 6, and everybody pays a 6th. If you have landscaping on the property and laundry facilities, you want to make that 7 and make the landlord one person there, so that they can pay for the watering of the common area and things along those lines, laundry, stuff like that. It's a better business practice to include the landlord if you're doing a RUBS system, just because then they can't accuse you of gouging them or overcharging them, or and it's too hard to figure out how many people's in this unit, if this is going to be based on how much your water bill is. It's just easier to either charge a flat rate or use the RUBS system based on units. Kind of not fair to somebody that has 5 people in one unit and 1 person in another unit. So you want to be careful with your occupancy standards and limits and make sure that they understand the water bill, or you could just do a flat fee for everyone. But then if you have someone that is abusing the water, you're going to find that challenging. Okay, I'm moving on unless we have questions. If you guys have questions, ask them, please. I'm here to help you. Inspection consent, circle 1, yes or no? I don't know that I'd have that on my rental agreement. I want to serve a notice, and if they don't let me in, I'm going to evict them for it, except currently in LA County. Don't know if you guys know this, but when LA County extended their moratorium, they wrote in the moratorium that failure to allow entry is no longer a cause for eviction while the moratorium is in place because of COVID. That is not the case in other counties. And currently we have cases where they're failing to allow entry. God knows they're destroying the unit. They're doing something in there. Don't know. But we are able to enforce that in other areas, just not in LA County currently under the no eviction moratorium. Okay, deep breath. We're still on page 1, you guys. I hope you've had some lunch. Parking spaces is asking you for your license and your space number. Obviously, this is where you want to define where they can park, especially if you have more than 1 unit on a property. You have a duplex, a fourplex. You may want to go out there with a nice can of spray paint and some tape so it doesn't look getified, and just paint some numbers on the parking lot and assign a stall to each person that is living there. Sometimes that's the easiest way to do it. Required notices, service of notices below. This is where you're telling them not only where they're going to pay their rent, but also who is to receive notices. And for those of us that are managers, managing investment property, this is where you want to put your information, okay? You're telling them that they should, who they make their checks payable to, who they're delivered to, where that is, a telephone number, and the days and times of which rent is to be paid. Not only do you have to define that in your rental agreement, you also must define it in a notice to pay rent or quit. So we want to make sure that all this information matches what you're going to put on a notice of non-payment. I'm going to switch to page 2 and we'll go faster now, I promise. But keep those questions coming because I'm also going back and forth to look at my notes on things that I wanted to bring to your attention. Okay, page 2. Here we go. And I'm just going to check the questions really quick to make sure I don't have anything. I have to go in the next 3 minutes. I'll be contacting you. Okay, thank you. We have a triplex. Water use is crazy, but cannot prove who's responsible. Not sure we can change, especially during COVID. You can't change during COVID, especially if Senate Bill 91 changes or passes tomorrow. One of the things you can do is routine maintenance inspections. Go in there and see if the toilets are running. Is the faucets dripping? And if they are dripping, what does your rental agreement say about dripping faucets? Is that the tenant's responsibility? So the way that your lease is written, as long as you're using someone's lease, whether it be Carforms, AGLA, California Apartment Association, you know, one of those associations or something along that. Usually it has the legal terms and verbiage in there to help protect you against things like that, like unreported tenant caused damage. Okay, that would be them not telling you that the toilet's running consistently and you now getting a $600 water bill. Could they be liable for that? Yes, but that's a question for your legal counsel, not for me. Depends on how your rental agreement is written. And I'm going to talk a lot about that going forward. So let me get past this second page and then I'm going to give you guys a bunch of tips and tricks. Okay. So if you have a manager managing the property, this is where their information goes. If you have an owner managing or an owner owning the property, this is where their information goes. You're not required to give a telephone number for the owner, and you are required to give a name of the owner. And you want to do that if you're managing investment property so that they sue the owner and not you. Okay, just saying. We're going to go to bat for you, though. We're going to go there and act on your behalf as an agent for the owner and give it the best shot we got. But we're not a party in the action as far as property management companies go, just so you're clear. I'm going to move on to lead. I happen to be a lead-based paint certified renovator from the EPA. If you're going to manage property pre-1978, you better know what the rules are. They are atrocious. Fines go at like $78,000 per day that you're in violation. So lead-based paint, definitely something you should be concerned about. Definitely something you should think about. If your property was built prior to 1978, you want to make sure you're disclosing. If you've had lead in the property before, disclose it. The reason being, that's public record. If you lie about it, they could hang you with that. Don't give them any ammunition. They have enough things going in their favor, okay? If you've had lead before and you had it remediated, if you had the property tested, put down the truth. Don't try to sugarcoat it and don't try to hide it here. This is gonna bite and it's gonna bite hard. So make sure that you're just disclosing. You can initial, agent initial, tenant initial. So you want initials from a tenant and you either want the owner or agent's initials on the other side regarding whatever happened there. Sorry, my octopus is going crazy. Chemicals. I'm going to move on to chemicals. This actually has to do with your pest control services and a couple of laws that go in fact with that. So I'm going to make this pretty simple on you. If you don't have a periodic pest control company that has a schedule where they're coming out quarterly, biannually, then you don't have to give them a list of the chemicals. How it works at this stage in the game is if you have them coming biannually, you need to get a list of the chemicals they're using and give a copy of that to your tenant. Okay. There's a special notice you have to serve 7 days prior to them using any of those chemicals and yada, yada, yada. So there's a lot of legislation and laws regarding exterminators on the premises and whether you have somebody on cycle where they come once a month or quarterly, like I was saying, versus if you have someone coming in treating for one time. You still have to disclose the chemicals, but this time it goes on a notice and not in the rental agreement. So a couple moving parts there, and I'd be more than happy to answer questions should we need to get into that further, but I'm going to move right on to rent. The rent should the rent start date. Okay, so rent start date, they're talking about the prorate here other than the first day of the month, and it goes into detail as far as the rent and the prorate. Here's something you need to know. If the rent is due on the 1st and you have a late fee that is acquired on the 5th, when you serve a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit? On the 2nd? When the rent's delinquent, depending on what day of the week it falls on? The late fee, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The grace period between when the rent's due and when a late fee is applied, that's what the grace period has to do with, is when is the late fee applied. The rent's still due on the 1st. If it's not paid by the 5th, on the 6th, you're going to get a late fee. That's a grace period that has to do with when the late fee is applied. It has nothing to do with when the rent is due. So make sure you know the difference. The grace period has to do with when the late fee is applied. The rent is still due on the 1st or whatever day you made the rent due. That's the due date of the rent. Got it? Grace period has to do with when the late fee applies. Do you have to allow a grace period? Nope. You could make the rent due on the 1st, and on the 2nd, you have a late fee. So that means you better pay it on or before the 1st of the month. Got it? Okay, I'm going to turn the page. I don't think there was anything else that I wanted to pull to your attention regarding late fee. My other, I'm sorry you guys, but I have pages of notes I want to share with you guys, because we're going to talk about what these rules mean and how they're all played out. Okay. So the first paragraph, and I've moved to page 3 just so everybody can follow me. This has to do with the acceptance of rent, and it has to do with some new laws that came into us. And I'll go over those. Basically, this one says that the owner may apply any payment made by the renter to any obligation of renter hereunder, meaning attached to this whole agreement. Any dates other than direction for the payment. Hold on, let me read this really quick, and I will tell you what this says in simple English. Allocated payment in any other way shall be null and void. So basically, this paragraph says if they pay rent, the rent must be received on or before the due date, or as provided by law. The reason that we're saying that, and I'm going to use January as an example, is Friday, January the 1st was a holiday. It's the 1st of January. It's New Year's Day. Can't have rent due on a holiday or a weekend. So the 2nd was Saturday. That's a weekend. The 3rd was Sunday. That's a weekend. The 4th was Monday, which is the first business day, and that now becomes the day the rent is due. It has to be the first business day of the month, and it's not delinquent until the 5th. So just because you put a date there doesn't mean the date always applies. Remember, the rent has to be due on the first full business of the month in order to proceed. So even if your rent's due, if that 1st is a holiday, and January is a great example because January 1st, like I said, New Year's Day, the rent can't be due on a holiday or a weekend. So you're going to have to play that out each and every month so that you're not serving your notice to pay rent or quit before the rent's even delinquent. That's a problem. Okay, so something to think about. Remember, first business day is when the rent's due. Second business day is when the rent's delinquent. Got it? Okay. So basically they're saying that this particular paragraph is saying that we can collect funds, and when you pay us funds, we can apply them to your account however we see fit. Usually we choose the oldest balance first. And I'll tell you why that's a business practice. A lot of people don't know. So in other words, let's just take 3 months, January, February, March. My tenant made a $500 payment in January. In February, they paid the full amount of $1,000 because that's how much the rent is. And then in March, they paid another $500. I'm gonna apply that. So $500 was paid in January. In February, I got $1,000 that paid off $500 of the balance of January. And it paid off $500 towards September. Oh my God, I'm okay, I promise. Paid $500 for February, and then that $500 they paid in March actually got applied to the past due balance for February. So technically, how much do they owe? $1,000, and that would be March's rent. But the reason that we do all of this and we go backwards to the oldest outstanding balance and apply funds there first is because California Civil Procedure says on a notice to pay rent or quit, we can only go back 12 months. So that's why we apply it to the oldest balance first and then let it carry forward that direction. That would be why. You don't want to get into eviction court and go, well, they owe me $50 from 4 years ago and $200 from 2 years ago. It doesn't work that way. Court only looks at the last 12 months of rent, period. So that's why we apply it that way in a business professional setting. And this paragraph allows you to do it the same way. Okay. It's good business practice to apply your rents that way. Makes it a little tricky when calculating COVID rents and if they paid the 25%, but that's a whole nother conversation, trust me. Payment method. The owner may refuse payments listed in the paragraph entitled rent as above. To cure a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit, please also know that means a 15-day notice, or to make a check good by the bank. Example, what this paragraph basically says is if the tenant bounced a check, you can refuse taking another check to pay for the bounced check they bounced already and say that you want cash only, or certified funds is the verbiage that we use in corporate America, meaning it has to be cashier's check, money order, or cash. If you accept cash, a lot of property management companies don't accept cash because of the risk, liability, and exposure. And just so you know, it's not the risk of employee theft always is the mindset there, but you also have to worry about somebody coming in and robbing them. You don't want them stealing your rent. So in property management, we usually deal with certified funds, cashier's check, money order, direct deposit can be a form of payment that works too. So just making sure you guys understand that. Number 2 on this page 3 is about the security deposit. I'm going to make this real simple for you. When a tenant says, I can't pay the rent, can you take it out of my deposit and then I'll pay my deposit back? Here's the response to that. Unfortunately, and here business professional response, and then I'll explain to you the why. Unfortunately, I can't touch your deposit until you vacate the unit. Deposits are allocated when the unit's been vacated. Everybody got that? Deposits are allocated when the unit is vacated. Hang on, let me see what kind of questions we had. I might have missed something. How's that going to work for COVID when they extend till June? And April is in protected period. I understand. I just use an example. And I'll go back about COVID rents. I'm sorry, you guys, I'm just seeing this. If the rent's mailed, it has to go by the postmark on there, and then you have to allow time for mailing. So if it's postmarked on or before the day that the rent becomes late, you can't charge the late fee because it has to be when it's postmarked, not when it's received. Okay, everybody got that? If you're looking at an envelope, it has to be when it is postmarked, not when it's actually received. So if the mail is running 3 weeks behind, like we had this last December over the holiday, and it comes in and the postmark on there is either the day the rent is due or prior to, you cannot charge a late fee based on when you receive it. It has to go by the postmark. As far as COVID, when will they, if they extend this to June? I don't know that they're going to do that. Governor Newsom has been talking about it. From what I'm reading everywhere and hearing on the news, he will most likely implement Senate Bill 91. He will do that on or before tomorrow. The latest he can implement a bill would be Friday. The other bill that is in question is AB 15, just so you know. Please repeat the COVID late fee policy during COVID. You can't charge late fees during COVID at all. At all. And not to get off track, because understanding the terms of your rental agreement is a pretty long journey. Just so you guys know, Senate Bill 91 is 40 pages long. This is it. It is lots of detail, and I hope none of you raised the rent during this time period either, because we're going to have to go back and fix that if they pass this bill, because that would be considered retaliation. And for those of you that follow me gingerly and listen to what I tell you, I've told you all along, don't raise the rent, don't raise the rent. If this passes tomorrow, you're going to regret it if you did, because we're going to have to go backwards and eat crow. Okay, sorry, trying to stay on track, lots of moving parts. I'm sorry, but I'm trying to give you guys all the information you need about everything. And it's hard when we have a bill that's up my nose. It is. Does that mean you're getting money? I think that's your hand, right? What does it mean if your nose itches? Does anybody know? I don't know. I'm trying to give you the information, but it's so hard because I don't know which bill's going to pass. I have an idea, the way the governor's talking, that it will most likely be Senate Bill 91. Will he make changes or amendments to it before he passes it? He could. So I don't want to give you a whole lot of detail on that because it isn't the law yet. And my theory is until it becomes a law, I don't even want to talk about it. But I've been so interested with this COVID thing and the way I foresee it all playing out that I've been watching it. And that's probably my problem, not yours. I'm not trying to scare you guys. I'm just letting you know it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I've been saying that for a year now. Okay, let's go back to security deposit. Oh no, there was one more question, wasn't there? Let me look, hold on. Sorry, you guys. No late fees during COVID at all. It is not allowed. Don't do it. Okay. In fact, makes that there can be no additional fees or penalties to the tenant during the COVID period. So I wouldn't try to implement a RUB system right now either. Okay, no additional fees to the tenant. Okay, security deposit. We don't allocate security deposits. A lot of times you'll have a tenant that says, I paid an additional deposit because I had a dog, but my dog died, or we gave it away or whatever, and I'd like to get that $500 back that you charged me additional. We don't allocate deposits until the property is vacant. It's very simple. If you stick to that policy, it puts you in a much better position. If you as an independent landlord have to borrow that security deposit to pay the rent, here's what you need to know. Ultimately, it is your responsibility to provide them back their full deposit when they vacate. So if you borrow from that money, that could harm you later if they vacate the unit and then you don't have the money to give them the refund. They could sue you then. So just something to think about, something I've always said, and something I try to teach people is we don't allocate, meaning we don't break them up. We don't do anything with them until a unit's vacant. Hold on, let me check. What are you talking about? Patty, I have seen a property management company put an arbitration clause in their rental agreement. I'm guessing that's not legal, but at least positions the tenant to try to work out the problem to a joint agreement. It happens sometimes, absolutely. If you have a default in the, whether you have an arbitration clause or not, you can always go to eviction court depending on how that clause is written. I know there's a lot of it in car forms. For everybody that has no idea what we're talking about, arbitration means you go in front of an arbitrator instead of a judge, and you guys both tell your sides of the story and they try to work it out for you. Sometimes you can come to an agreement, sometimes you can't. If you can't, you end up going to eviction court. My theory is this: you can always try putting that arbitration clause in there, and we're going to talk about adding additional clauses because I'm going to tell you guys, stop doing it, and I'll tell you why. A lot of us don't even think about it. We'll do something real simple, and then we don't even realize how that harms us going forward, okay? So security deposits, we don't want to give them back out or let them borrow from the deposit. We don't do that. It's your responsibility to keep that deposit in whole in its entirety. Let me give you an example. 2 months ago, you let your tenant borrow $500 out of the deposit because they were short on the rent, okay? You had a fire in your unit last week. You're gonna terminate the tenancy and you need to immediately give the tenant their full deposit back, only you don't have it. Now what? You have to put that $500 out that they borrowed. They can't borrow from the deposit, okay? Don't do it. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. It's a bad business practice, simply said. Okay. Unless anybody has any questions about the security deposit in here, I'm going to tell you right now, the law says you have 21 days to refund the deposit or a letter explaining where the deposit went. You don't want to miss that deadline of having that postmarked by that time period. If you do, it will bite, and it bites hard, just so you know. So I am now moving to page 3. I'm sorry, I'm moving to page 4 under utilities, okay? Had a Red Bull this morning and trying to stay on track, and I got a lot more information to give you, and time isn't running. Trying. Utilities. It says here, renters shall pay for all utilities supplied to the premises except for those set out in section G. Remember on the front page, there's letters. This references where that is on the front page. And different rental contracts, it may say right here, who's paying for the utilities. This specific one from AGLA puts all the dollar amounts on the front page and then references them in paragraphs throughout the rental agreement. So as in section G, if you guys want to know what I'm talking about, turn back to page 1, look at section G. It says clearly right there what utilities the landlord is responsible for paying. And remember, if you're using water, use the word reasonable usage, okay? Might help you later. And I'll tell you from based on my own experience, building a case on reasonable usage versus excessive usage was quite challenging, but I was successful at it. In other words, it took me a lot of work to put together 12 months of water bills, figure out the medium, see where the difference happened, and go after them that way. But I was able to do it by providing those water bills. Save your water bills. Don't shred them, okay? You might need them later, trust me. And it's not as easy getting copies of them from the water company as you would think it is, okay? At least it wasn't a couple of years ago. It was a nightmare, but I got through it. I kept my water bills, so I worked it out. So basically, this is where it says if owner's charged with any such amount, and it goes into detail saying if the owner is authorized to get a notice from any utility company. I use the same process with my insurance. I want to know if the tenant has renter's insurance and their policy is going to be canceled. And I know I'm switching right over to renter's insurance, but same thing happens with utilities sometimes. We want to define who's responsible to pay those utilities, because if power gets shut off because the tenant didn't get the bill, we don't want to be responsible for cutting off the power. So very important that you use your contract to define who's paying for what, okay? Parking and storage rules. Again, section 8, they're referencing where to park, where they can't park. It's giving rules that the owner could have any unauthorized vehicles towed away. So this is where your teeth are in the paragraph there of enforcing unoperable vehicles on the property, unregistered vehicles, abandoned vehicles, yada, yada, yada. I want to tell you that each city has their own rules about towing. So what you're doing in one city, and they go from tow truck companies, I believe in a 12-mile radius. They're only allowed to cover a 12-mile radius. Has something to do with competition and not my area. But I will tell you that the rules for towing a vehicle can vary from city to city. So here's my opinion, not my advice. Contact a tow company, have them come put up their signs about towing and in your property. And in the event is to tow that vehicle, that way it kind of leaves you out. In other words, I'm sorry, there was an abandoned vehicle on the property. We called the tow company. The warning is posted there on the building. It's a you problem, not a me problem. You shouldn't have parked there, or you should have got your tags registered, or whatever the issue is. So that's where you define those rules. I'm gonna give you guys a tip right about now. Pay attention because this is a good one. You see the rental agreement and how it's all typed up and it looks so pretty? Okay. When you take your pen and you start writing additional terms in there, I'm going to tell you what that does. Just because you put it in your lease doesn't make it legal. You hear me? I'll give you a good example. You might put in here that the tenant is responsible to maintain the, hold on, misspoke. The tenant is responsible to change the AC filters. You could put that in your lease, but it doesn't make it legal. Okay, you with me? Who's responsible to maintain the premises? The landlord is. Can you take that responsibility and put a portion of it on the tenant? Absolutely not. So just because you wrote it in the rental contract doesn't make it legal. And I've noticed, and I had a friend a long time ago that was a judge. He's no longer a judge, but he told me, Patty, when you have a written contract like this, it defines all the rules. When we see ink written in there and they're adding provisions, we focus on those. Is this legal? Because the first time we see somebody's handwritten notes in there, we're going to go through that whole thing and see what else they did that might not be legal. It's a trigger for us. So here's my opinion. Don't trigger them. Stop writing notes on your rental agreement, except for and this and add this. Don't do it. Do an addendum. That would be the proper process and procedure of extending a contract or adding additional terms, is to add an addendum sheet. When you handwrite it in there, it trains the judges to go right to that paragraph and see what you wrote in there and if it's legal or not. I see a question come through twice, which means I missed it once. What if inoperable vehicle is parked in the garage? What about non-working vehicles behind the fence, still visible but may not be towable? What's your rental agreement say? Are they allowed to have non-operable vehicles? Are they allowed to park a historic vehicle in their garage? It all depends on what your rental agreement says. See how it's so important? These are the rules which everybody has to follow, you and the tenant. If it's not in your rental agreement and it's not a law, you're going to have a hard time enforcing it. Okay. Number 5, named renter assignment and subletting. So this basically is saying that the premises shall not be occupied by more than the maximum number set in section J. That would be on page 1, remember, unless required by law, nor a person occupant set out in section K without advance written consent of additional occupants. Okay, let me put this all in perspective for you. What this is this is saying they can't sublet the property, meaning assign the rental agreement to somebody else, rent it to somebody else, and they live somewhere else. So they basically rented it because the person that needed to rent it didn't qualify or something along those lines. This is the paragraph you have that helps protect you from unauthorized occupants, too many people, okay? So you want to make sure your rental contract has something in regards to subletting, because we don't want that. It also helps stop Airbnbs from being run. Okay, subletting would fall under Airbnb or temporary housing and things like that. So very important you have it in here. At the bottom of this paragraph, I want to bring something more to your attention. And this is a tip and a trick, okay? It says a guest may not stay on the premises for more than blank consecutive days or a total of blank days in a 12-month period without the prior written consent of the owner. Most people, and don't ask me why, put 14 days there that a tenant can stay for, may not stay on the premises for more than 14 consecutive days. I put 3, not 14. Most people put 14 there. I put 3. Do you want to know why? It's a good answer. It's a lot easier to catch someone that's breaking the rules in 3 days than it is in 14 days. We're talking about 2 weeks. See the problem? So it makes it easier on you to catch an unauthorized occupant, subletting, things like that, if they can only stay 3 days and not 14. So that's the only reason I put 3 days there. Also, on the total of blank days in a 12-month period, I put like 5. Why? Because it says they have to get written consent of the landlord. If my tenant calls me and says, hey, my sister just had a baby, she's having some trouble, she's going to come stay with me for 2 weeks. Okay, no problem. I will give you written consent that she can be your guest for 2 weeks. I'm not saying she can be a tenant here, but it's a lot easier to catch unauthorized occupants in 3 days than it is in 14. Okay, so make things easier on you. Just saying. So that's my tip and trick for number 5. Okay. Number 6 says basically that this tenant has examined the premises and everything that we're offering. It basically says what you see is what you get. We're not putting in a swimming pool. We didn't promise you anything orally that we're gonna, help me out here, put in a tanning bed. We're not going to do it. What you see is what you get, and you've decided that they're in good and operable condition. You don't want to move somebody into a property that has things that are broken, okay, or that are trying to fix things up. This could be a habitability issue. A lot of times we'll have an owner say, well, I let them move in and told them they could have their first month's rent free if they painted and finished up the flooring. They never painted and they never finished up the flooring. And because you didn't provide them habitable premises, they never owed the rent either. See how that worked? So want to be really careful not to move somebody into a property until it is rent ready. Okay. Oh, hang on. Things going on here. I'm going to shut them off.
Please enter the extension that you wish to.
I did that. Okay, so good condition, we just talked about that. The property is in good condition. The renter shall return the property in the good condition, yada, yada, yada. Anybody have any questions so far? Because I'm going to get to the important stuff that really matters here, and I'm trying to move right along. Page 5, item 7, maintenance, repair, and alterations. This is a huge paragraph, and it is golden, okay? So basically what this says is it says the tenant has to keep the property clean, sanitary condition, dispose of garbage in the waste containers, stored in a clean sanitary manner, properly use all electrical, gas and plumbing fixtures. So if you start reading this, this is usually where you have your teeth when you have a covenant notice or a break of the lease, a material breach of the lease. A lot of times you're going to find the paragraph you're looking for under your maintenance, repair, and alterations. Basically, alterations to the property without written consent of the landlord would be something along the lines of installing a flat screen TV, doing something along those lines. Oh my gosh, I'm going to shoot this thing, you guys. Hold on, let me figure out how to turn the volume down because that'll be the first thing I do. And I don't know how. So, oh, I found it. I found it. I found it. Okay, now maybe we won't be bothered. Sorry for paging me. So any alterations that they made, if they're not keeping the unit clean, this is the paragraph that you find the teeth to put on your covenant notice, okay? Remember how you have to say what they're doing wrong and reference it in the lease? This is where you copy the paragraph verbatim. Talks about wallpaper, talks about modifications to the property without written consent of the landlord. 4 most common ones that we have is painting. You'll like these, I promise. Installing a flat screen TV, because they fixed that to the studs. So now it becomes part of the real property, not the TV, but the mount that they used. What else do we see? Ring doorbell systems. That would be a modification to the property without written consent of the landlord. So painting, ring doorbells, flat screen TVs, and the number one, and we all do it, it's a human thing, okay? Anytime we buy a new house, what's the first thing we do? We change the locks because we don't know who has a key. Tenants, we do the same thing. We change the locks because we don't know who has a key. That could be considered a material breach of the lease and a cause for eviction. Just saying. So that is where you're going to pull a lot of your stuff that you wouldn't think your lease says, because it's all written in legal terms for the most part, but it puts a lot of things in perspective. It even says about clutter. It talks about airflow. It talks about all kinds of things. So your maintenance, repair, and alterations paragraph usually is where all your teeth are when you're doing a covenant notice, also known as a cure or quit. Okay. So let's move along to our smoke detector and carbon monoxide detectors. This is where it tells them that it's in there, it's working. If it's not working, you need to contact the landlord. Okay. When you're doing an interior inspection and you go there and the smoke detector is off the wall, that's usually because somebody a little too short, I know because I'm 4'8", can't reach it. So they're whacking it with a broom handle, or standing on a chair, or taking it down, or dismantling it because the battery's dead and it's 2 in the morning and nobody can sleep. It's happened to all of us, but it's the tenant's responsibility to make sure that those are functioning. And if they're not functioning properly, this also tells them they should be notifying you. Okay, so that's the paragraph that helps protect you for that. Damage and destruction. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on this just because I feel you. I see the problem. So damage and destruction, this would have to do if the property was destroyed due to a fire, an earthquake, a flood, and it determines whether or not you have to put your tenant in a hotel or if you can sever and terminate the contract. Very important paragraph to have in your rental agreement, okay? You can't say that you won't put them in a contract or in a hotel and that they're responsible for supplemental housing. And I'll explain to you briefly why. If you put a tenant in a 1-year lease term or a 6-month lease term, and 2 months into it, it catches fire, there's a flood, yada, 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 you signed a rental agreement stating that you would provide them habitable premises until that date ends. The 6 months, the year, whatever it may be. With that being said, it makes it extremely, whoever is messing with our phone system here at the office, the entire staff is yelling at them to stop doing it. And I just keep reaching over there and shutting it off so you guys can't hear it. But I know you guys all just heard that, okay? Sorry, it's kind of funny. Let me get back to damage. Sorry, squirrel. Okay, sorry. So this is most important because in the event that we don't want to pay for hotels, let's just get to the bottom line. We don't want to, okay? I don't want to. I don't want to spend my money to put them up in a hotel. I don't agree with it. But if they're in a term, you may have to. You agreed to provide them habitable premises until the expiration of that term. Okay, so you may be forced to put them in a hotel while whatever's being remedied is being remedied. Also, if you made renter's insurance a requirement, then I would suggest that you tell them to call their insurance agent so they can file a claim because their house isn't habitable. So sometimes the insurance company will pay to put them in a hotel. That's what they pay their insurance company for. So as nicely as I could say this, sometimes when things go wrong, if the tenant's insured, you get to hit the easy button because it makes your life much easier. Moving on to keys. This is where it talks about the keys. I'm going to tell you guys right now. You can't charge $50 for every key that's not returned. It doesn't work that way. You can charge what it costs you at Lowe's to make a replacement key. If you have to change the locks, you can charge them whatever that costs. If you had to call a locksmith, you could charge them whatever that costs. You can't make up numbers and tell them that they're going to be charged $50 for every key they don't return when they can go to Lowe's and buy another one for $4. It's not fair. And remember, we have to keep things fair. We're in business, okay? Fair housing, big one. So this is where you would put the keys, and it goes on to explain to them about the renter could be liable to replace lost keys, things of that nature, and what to do in the event of a lockout. We talked about renter's insurance. If you're requiring that your tenant get renter's insurance, I would make it also a requirement to be listed as an additional insured or interested party on the renter's insurance policy, because that notifies us as an interested party if the tenant doesn't pay the bill or something along those lines. So it makes your life easier. That extra mail sometimes can be a problem when you're dealing with a volume of doors, like at a management company. I remember at one point we were responsible for managing about 5,000 single-family residences and about 3,200 apartment doors. With that being said, when you make it a requirement for everybody to have insurance, you have to hire one person just to sit there and process all the insurances that are coming in, because you're getting them from vendors, you're getting them from your landlords, the owner's insurance, because you want to be listed as additional insured or interested party in case their policy gets canceled, you know about it, and also for the tenants. So there's a lot of paperwork involved, but at the end of the day, it's the big umbrella that helps protect us the best. So just keep that in mind when you're dealing with a large volume of businesses and you have a pretty good book of business. That insurance requirement can cause you to have to hire another full-time or even a part-time employee just to deal with the volume of insurances that are coming through from vendors, landlords, tenants. It's crazy. Okay. So inspection and entry, just so you guys know, this is California Civil Code 1954. It has to do with the 24-hour notice. Stop texting your tenant and telling them you need to come in and check. It doesn't work. It doesn't hold up in a court of law. I tell people all the time, save yourself, kill a tree. Put the piece of paper on their door. Why? Because the piece of paper is the court recognized document that the court recognizes. When you do it through text and you do it through other avenues, could be considered harassment and then used against you. So don't make yourself susceptible to that. I always tell people, when your tenant texts you in the middle of the night with their ridiculous BS story, do me a favor. Type back to them. Tell them that they're a jerk, that their wife's overweight, that their dog's ugly, whatever it is you want to say to them so that you feel better, and don't hit send. Okay? Don't communicate with them. Okay, Stacy, thank you. Go to your thing and watch the replay later. You'll be interested in the back end of this, I promise. I'm getting there. I know it's a lot of information. I'm sorry. So going back to that inspection and entry, if they don't allow you in, and forgive me because right now I'm going to use LA County and COVID, that is the only city currently where you cannot enforce if they fail to allow entry. LA County passed in their moratorium that while the moratorium is in effect, notice to enter is no longer a cause for eviction because of COVID. That only applies currently to LA County. It is in that county moratorium and should expire when the moratorium expires. We don't see that anywhere else in Southern California area. So if they refuse to allow you entry, you serve a covenant notice. If you serve a new notice to enter and they still won't allow you to come in, you most likely would then serve a notice to quit. That would be the process and procedure of the court and what they require to base an eviction on cause. See how that worked? So very important that we have all these elements in our rental contract because they really help us at the end of the day. Landscaping, the renter is or is not responsible for the upkeep of the yard and the maintenance of the landscaping, including watering, mowing, weeding, clipping, things of that nature. So another place to have some teeth, especially if we have a tenant that's damaging our unit. We wanted to find who's responsible to keep the grass green. okay? Not just landlord hired a landscaper, okay, but that doesn't mean the tenant's gonna water it. So you wanna make sure they understand they have to keep it green. Although the gardener comes and mows it and takes away the leaves, they have to keep it green. So very important we define that in our rental contract. Also, smoking. It's either subject to a local non-smoking ordinance, and I don't know of a city off the top of my head that has one other than Laguna Beach, Huntington Beach. I know it's a lot of beach communities that have no smoking ordinances, meaning it's the city's law. If it's not the law in the city, you want to check the other box, okay? And remember that non-smoking is non-smoking of anything. So hookahs, vaping pens, marijuana, non-smoking is non-smoking, period, end of report. And it also states that the tenant's guests are responsible for enforcing the non-smoking policy with their guests. So that helps you there. I'm gonna give you guys another solid and tell you, please don't use the words smoke-free in your advertising. You want to use non-smoking. Okay. The reason that I'm saying that is we had quite a few major property management apartment communities that said they were smoke-free facility and they had barbecues on the property. They were talking about cigarette smoking, not barbecue smoke, but they said smoke-free. So we're seeing some of those people be challenged. Just don't use the words. It's simple. We are a property, this non-smoke only. And I always say in all of the areas on the premises, including the garage, you don't want them to think that they can have that one area they can go smoke in, because it's that one area that then reeks and has secondhand smoke. And now we're having problems with third-hand smoke. Just to tell you guys what that is, third-hand smoke is the residue that is left behind after somebody smokes. And sometimes we can't see it. It's in the AC vent systems, it's everywhere. Well, what they found is that third-hand smoke, which is the residue, that yellow tar looking stuff that's on the walls, wherever it may be, in the carpet, it emits toxins whenever it feels like it, is what the studies found out. And even if someone is not smoking in a unit, someone can get secondhand smoke damage through third-hand smoke due to the residue that's left behind. Don't make yourself susceptible to lawsuits. Keep it simple, just non-smoking. And non-smoking means non-smoking of anything. So keep it real simple, just non-smoking. And you do have to have an addendum, an attached addendum for that. And know that if you have more than one addendum, the word or the correct verbiage is addenda. Addenda means you have multiple addendums. Rules and regulations, basically they're saying that you have to comply with all the rules and regulations, or it could be a breach of the rental contract. It also goes into security personnel, and it may even go into, because I read this last night, surveillance cameras. Don't use the word security ever, unless you have somebody monitoring those cameras 24/7 and can call and report an incident while it's in progress. Then they are surveillance cameras. They are not security cameras. You are not providing security, and you don't want to be sued for bait and switch or false advertisement or any of those things. So just use surveillance. You're surveying. You're not providing security. So very important there. Use of the premises. This one goes into detail, talking to them about no sound, no loud noises, no talking, no musical instruments. This is where you get your teeth for somebody being a nuisance at a property. So very important that that clause is in your rental agreement as well. And now I'm on page 7, item 16, insurance. We talked about this briefly. In cooperation of this rental agreement, the renter agrees to maintain renter's insurance in adequate amounts. Basically, this is the disclosure that says you have to have insurance. Okay, so that's the one that covers you there. Number 17 says compliance with the law. The renter shall not violate any law or commit or permit any waste, damage, or a nuisance in, on, or about the premises. So let me explain to you very quickly what this paragraph means in simple English terms. It says that the tenant and the tenant's guests are responsible to follow the law. So in the event that you were to get a police report stating that there was a fight at the property and this tenant in unit A and the tenant in unit C were fighting, this would be the curable breach of covenant of them following the rules, or the quit notice also has to be referred in your lease. So that's where that would be about them following rules. Has to do with code enforcement, not just arrests. So if they have trash, debris, things of that nature, and code enforcement is giving them violations, those are laws and they're breaking them. So this is the paragraph that we would use to reference that on a cure quit notice or on a 3-day quit. Notice of termination, number 18, this basically is telling them how they have to give notice 30 days prior to them vacating, and goes over that paragraph. It's pretty self-explanatory. Non-curable breach of the lease. Number 20, it says police raid on the premises resulting in an arrest or of renter or possession, sale, storage of any illegal narcotic, controlled substance, chemical or herbal contraband in or about the premises, blah, 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 blah. What this says is if they break the law, okay, by having the police there for any one of those reasons, that could be considered a material breach of the lease. I'm going to let you know that one has to be pretty strong, especially with the COVID restrictions and where we are today. What I'm telling people is if you don't have a police report or you don't have a complaint from the city, code enforcement violation, something along those lines, makes it really hard to do an eviction right now with all the COVID restrictions. Really hard, especially since the rent's not due. So challenging, yes, just a wee bit. But that's where you have your compliance of the laws and they have to follow the laws. A notice of termination means they have to give us written 30-day notice when they intend on vacating. It goes into detail to talk about those terms. Here we go with my important ones. Waiver of default. People ask me all the time, what does that mean? What is a waiver clause? So we're going to talk about that a little bit so that we're all on the same page. I skipped that earlier. I'm sorry, I'm going back to it now. Waiver of default. If your tenants rents $3,000, due on the 1st, late on the 5th, right? This is how we painted the picture when we started. And the tenant says, you know what, I had a death in the family and I'm not going to be able to pay the rent until the 15th this month. And you say, oh, I totally understand. Maybe you know the family, whatever. You can go ahead and pay the rent on the 15th this month. Maybe you're going to tell them, and I'm not going to charge you a late fee. If you don't have a waiver clause in your rental agreement, you just change the day the rent is due and when the late fees applied. Got that? Does that make sense? And I'll go back and look at my questions now. I see there's a bunch of them there. Sorry. But we want to make sure that we have a waiver of default in there. Basically, it says just because I changed this rule this month doesn't mean I changed it for all the upcoming months. Okay? In other words, I let it slide this time, but the real rules apply. A lot of times in property management, in a property management setting, when we take over a new property, and I've always made this a habit, Nina, please pay attention if you're still on here with us, because this is a really good business practice when you bring on a new property outside of LA. If you have a written rental agreement, the first thing that I always did was send them a 30-day notice to change the terms of tenancy. And it went like this. As of 31 days from now, we will revert back to the original terms of the written rental agreement, especially if there's no waiver clause, because you don't know what that owner's made exceptions for, waived in the past, and we don't even really know what the rules are, especially if there's no waiver clause in there. So if there's no waiver clause in the rental agreement, Doing a 30-day notice to change the terms of tenancy to revert back to the original written terms of the lease dated blah, blah, blah is a good business practice, because then you know what the rules are without a doubt, and you don't have to try to guess and figure out what the owner did prior to you taking over management. There's my solid. Okay, let me check questions really quick. Dun, dun, dun. Thank you, Patty. I have to get to another appointment. You're the best. Thank you, Stacy. Pasadena. Yeah. Pasadena is quite challenging. What if you have a joint and several tenancy rental agreement and you receive a 30-day notice from one of the tenants to vacate? Okay, and then at the end of the 30 days, some of the co-tenants haven't left the property. Can you evict? You could. You can't make somebody live there, but in the event that they're not on the lease contract and who they leave behind, remember, you don't allocate the deposit until the unit's vacated. Remember that? We don't allocate deposits until the unit's vacated. If you have 3 roommates in a property and one moves out and the other 2 stay there, there's really nothing you can do about it as long as they're paying the rent. If you have someone move out of our property and they legally let their brother and sister move in, now you can evict them for unauthorized occupants, and you're going to name all 3 of them most likely. Just to answer that question, Chris, and I hope I got it. Prior question in this reference also to any applicable COVID restrictions. The government has lost their damn mind with COVID. I get it. Not much has changed from when the CDC originally told us that a lot of people were going to get ill and a small amount were going to die. That's what's happening, folks. Lots of people are getting sick, small amount are going to die. Kind of like the flu every year. I'm not trying to downplay it. I do know people that have lost their lives in this, but I know a lot more people that have survived it. Okay, so I can't explain, deny, confirm, or even understand why we're running around like chickens with our heads cut off and rewriting the rules over a flu. And I get that it's a bad flu and a lot of people are going to get sick. Only a small amount are going to die. They've been telling this since February and March, but now that it's here and it's hitting us, that's what we're seeing. 400,000 people died out of how many million? Okay, so not trying to freak anybody out or downplay the situation. It is a situation. A lot of people are getting sick, but personally, I don't think they should rewrite the terms of our rental agreement because of it on when our rents due. I'll be quiet because I get mad and then I get worked up and then it just all comes out of my mouth like verbal vomit. Okay, I don't want to do that. So let's get back on track. A non-curable breach of the lease. We talked about that, having a police raid on the property. There's a few non-curable breaches that you can do. I see another question coming, but I'm pretty sure recall Newsom. Absolutely, girl. I think that Governor Newsom, along with President Biden, should be holding targets at the shooting range. That's just my opinion. I love that the very first thing he did, yes, and chew, yes, I agree. The very first thing President Biden did in front of God and everybody to make a statement was he picked up a pen and he said, I'm signing a no eviction moratorium. What'd you sign to help us landlords? How is that even? What'd you do to help us? Where's our protection from foreclosure? Oh, what? We don't have any. Why? Because we want to give you this loan. We want to give you this money and we want to make you have to pay or get this. We want you to be attached to us. We want you to need us. Don't get me started. Because we're rich and we can afford it. Yeah, we have the deepest pockets, right, you guys? Landlord, it makes us sound so wealthy. What they have no idea is we're robbing from Peter to pay Paul to make this work because we haven't gotten rent for a year. As owners, we have been paying for the trash cans. The trash has increased exponentially in LA County, and we need more cans. We want to change the term and have our tenants pay for their own trash can from the city of Long Beach at $25 each and no charges decrease in rent. Okay with you? Absolutely not. Don't shoot me, Jackie, but don't do it till tomorrow. Actually, do me a favor. Give yourself till Friday, okay? Make the decision on Friday. If Senate Bill 91 passes, we can't have any additional fees, fines, or penalties to the tenant other than the rent. No rent increases, no late fees, no changes in what they have to pay for from prior to COVID through the whole COVID thing. So I get what you're saying, but I'm going to tell you to err on the side of caution and don't make any changes right now until we know what the law is going to be, because I do not want to set you up for failure. I got, okay. Yeah. Hey, you ask, and I always try to get you guys to err on the side of caution, and this would be why. I hate breaking the landlord-tenant relationship, and I'll give you a good example. Nowhere in all of this shit show, if you will, did it ever say, or has it said, landlords can't raise the rent? It's unethical for us to raise the rent. Think about this. We're telling the tenant they can't move. They have to shelter in place. They have to stay here. We as the landlord shouldn't punish them. What if our mortgage company said, really? We're going to give you a late fee that's 10 times the amount it normally is because of COVID. That's not fair. That's not right. We're forced into this mortgage. We're stuck here. And now you're going to increase the fees on us. It's just not right. It's not ethical. Okay. Hear me out. We also haven't heard from the Department of Fair Housing over when's a reasonable amount of time to increase rents or terminate tenancy after a global pandemic and it not be considered retaliation. Well, I'll tell you right now, Senate Bill 19 says that's going to be 180 days, 6 months, if that passes. So for those of us that have increased the rent, we may have to go backwards and eat crow. Whenever we have to go backwards and eat crow, it sends this message to the tenant. I have no idea what I'm doing because now I'm having to go backwards and change it. So eating crow around that is going to be really hard to do, number one. Number two, it severs that landlord-tenant balance. We want to keep that balance going as long as possible because the more balanced that is, the less problems we have. We don't want them to question everything we do going forward because we made a mistake once and now they question everything we do. See the issue? So that's why I urged everybody, slow down, err on the side of caution, don't increase rents, don't charge late fees, because if this bill passes tomorrow like they're anticipating that it will, we're not going to be able to. It's going to be retaliatory. We can't touch them for 6 months. Has no difference than them having bed bugs, calling code enforcement, calling fair housing. I mean, we're in a state of emergency right now. Don't raise the rent. It's just not worth it. It's too risky, okay? No additional fees right now, if you will. Let me see, I saw another question come through. Oh, that was the okay, blah. I like that, by the way. Okay, where are we here? Non-curable pest control, fumigation, and extermination. Remember I was telling you guys that it's a requirement. If you read A and B, A basically says they have to comply with the instructions from the pest exterminator, fumigator, or premises preparation, including proper bagging, storage of food, perishables, medications, yada, yada, yada. This has to do not only with regular bugs and infestation fumigation, it also has to do, I see something unethical, so I'll come back to that. It also has to do with bed bugs. So hear me out, you guys. This paragraph right here, number 21, is the verbiage you need in the event that they haven't cleaned their unit and the exterminator can't fumigate for cockroaches or bed bugs because the tenant didn't clean or they didn't prepare their unit. There is a law protecting us as landlords saying that if they don't comply with the exterminator, we can evict them. That is cause. Okay, so it's that paragraph number 21 that saves your rear end when the exterminator goes in there and goes, I can't treat it for bed bugs, the place is a pigsty. Okay, please put that in writing. Let's give them notice, let them cure or quit. They don't fix it. That's when you start the drama, if you will. And I mean that, the drama. Let me clarify what I'm saying and then I'll go to that question. I'm sorry. For the last 20 years, we've always told our attorney, my tenant's doing this and they're doing this and this happened and this happened and that happened and that. And the attorney always says the same thing. But do they owe you rent? Because going after the rent is the easiest way in the state of California. Forget the drama, go after the rent. The drama's the hard way. Used to be that way because it was a 3-day pay rent or quit, and then you could start eviction. When you're building the drama, it's a 24-hour notice to enter, a 3-day curable breach of covenant, a new 24-hour notice to enter. Depending on how many times you have to try to remedy this before you can quit, LA County requires 4 attempts, according to our LA attorney. Here in San Bernardino County, it may be 1 and done. It just depends on what the severity is. With COVID going on, you want to err on the side of caution. And before you serve a quit notice, you want to call your attorney and ask them, because that can cause quite a problem. So want to make sure that we have all that covered and that it's being taken care of as far as that goes. But this is where you have the teeth for that. Let me see what this question was. Then it's unethical for them to raise our owners' taxes. Honey, but we're landlords. Lords makes us sound like we have deep pockets. The reality is we don't. I know, I get it. They think that just because we have investment property, we're rich. They don't understand some of us have inherited these properties, and we're not making a dime, we're losing money every month. And then when they're not paying us, it just expedites that whole process. So I get you, I feel you. Remember, I have skin in the game. Their perception of us and what really happens, 2 totally different things, right? Okay, so that's what's going to help you in the event that they're not preparing their unit for fumigation or they're not complying with the exterminator's requests. Animal, water beds, musical instrument. This is about them bringing in additional pets. Also about them not having any liquid filled furniture and no musical instruments on the premises, because it can affect the right to quiet enjoyment of all other neighboring residents as well. Designation of parties determines who the owner is, who the manager is throughout the contract. Partial invalidity. Any portion of this lease agreement is held invalid. It shall not affect the validity of any other portion of this lease agreement. In other words, what they're saying is if there's one paragraph that doesn't apply anymore because the law changed, it doesn't make the whole document valid, just that paragraph, okay? This is where we're getting into the legal terms of what your contract means. Attorney's fees clause. We're going to talk about this, you guys, because not all of them are written this way where it says not to exceed $500. Some of them are left blank, and I'm going to talk to you about that. I cannot advise you on what to put there, but I can tell you a story, okay? I'm good at stories. Your attorney's fees clause says that the prevailing party, that means whoever wins in court, is going to be awarded those attorney fees, whatever they are. So the loser has to pay those. They don't say it that way. So I had an owner once that said, my last eviction cost me $5,000. So I'm going to put $5,000 right there. You just made a rule that says if you lose the eviction case on a technicality or any other reason, you're going to pay the tenant $5,000 for their legal expenses. See how that worked? That attorney's fees clause is a two-way fence, and it works like this. And I can tell you this because I come from a legal firm, right? That's where I work currently. Example, tenant walks in the door and says, hi, and we don't represent tenants here, so don't get the wrong idea. I'm giving you an example. Hi, I want to sue my landlord because whatever reason. First thing the attorney does is find the contract, flip through it, find the attorney's fees clause, and sees what the money is. If it's $500, that's all the attorney can make out of this. Sometimes they hand it back to him and say, I'm sorry, there's no money in it for me. So it's a deterrent to opposing counsel. I don't necessarily think I'd put a large dollar amount in there, because if I lost on a technicality, meaning case was dismissed, go home, I don't want to have to pay my tenant whatever dollar amount I put there. You can have an addendum that says that each party is responsible for their own legal fees. But what I'm trying to put in your head is the smaller that number is, the less likely opposing counsel will come and take a case, okay? They don't want to work for free, simply said. And yes, I do know that there's a lot of landlord groups out there that do free for their free subsidized legal expenses. There's a lot of legal counsel out there that gets paid by the federal government. Don't get me started. Have a friend. She has a family member that is trying to be evicted out of their property, and they went and got BOSTA to help them. Okay. Without getting into a lot of legalities, this is what I have to say. BOSTA charged them a set fee at hello to listen to them and talk to them, whatever that dollar amount would be. I would guess that it would be between $200 and $400. And I'm just saying, these are nonprofits, you guys. You tell me how it works. Then they have them say, okay, we're your attorney of record and we're going to represent you. Just sign here that we're your legal counsel. So they sign. It also says that they're going to get a third of any of the money that's awarded to them, 33 1/3%. So in the event that you, the landlord, have to pay relocation fees in LA of $25,000, BOSTA, the nonprofit, is going to take a third of that money from the tenant. If they sever the contract and terminate BOSTA, they're going to have to pay those legal expenses back. God knows what they are, because I'm sure they didn't give you a fee schedule when you signed your name on the paper. So just saying, BOSTA may be nonprofit and free, but somebody making money somewhere. I'm just saying. Okay, let me get going. Very important that you understand your attorney's fees clause. That's it's something all attorneys look at. It's the first thing they look at because it determines how they're going to get paid. We don't want to be signing up for lawsuits at our door. Guarantors. You can require that you have a guarantor on your property. Here's my experience talking for me. If you have a guarantor, you want a guarantor agreement. You want to make sure that your guarantor or your cosigner, either way you want to define the word, same thing, that they're responsible not for the duration of the term, but for the duration of the tenancy. See how that worked? So when you're looking at your cosigner agreement stating how long they're responsible for, you want to make sure it's for the term of the tenancy, not the term of the agreement. If your original agreement is for a month to month, then that cosigner is only responsible for the first month. Do I have your attention yet? If it's for the term of the tenancy, then the cosigner would be responsible as long as the tenant resided in the property. That's what you want. That's where the big teeth are. Yep, somebody else is saying, I got burned on that one. So you hear what I'm saying, you guys, okay? We have testimonial from somebody that actually suffered the repercussions of that. If it's that the cosigner is responsible for the term of the tenancy, did I say it wrong? Now I just confused myself. I'm a blonde. Sorry. If it's for the term of the contract, okay, then if this is a 30-day contract and goes month to month after, they're only responsible for 30 days. You want them responsible for the term of the tenancy. So as long as that tenant resides in that premises, that cosigner is responsible. That's how you want that written. So watch that one. And I saw something else come through, so bear with me. Patty, the other angle is the tenant's attorney is going to go after the landlord's insurance company with no regard for the $500. Okay, I get what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. It depends on what they're suing for. I'm talking about a regular eviction that cost $5,000 last time this owner did it. So he put $5,000 there. What you're saying to them is, in the event that I lose on a technicality, maybe your 3-day notice or your 15-day notice to pay rent or quit didn't have a phone number on it. You just lost on a technicality. You may have to pay them $5,000. That's what I'm saying. So watch those technicalities, okay? They suck and they're expensive. I speak from experience. Okay, so we talked about guarantors. Mail, owner's not responsible for mail delivery. You want this in all your agreements. Lost damage packages, you're not responsible. You're the landlord. You're not UPS, USPS. This is not you. Credit report, this is usually on all of them, stating that the owner may use the credit report attempting to collect past due rent payments, late fees. We may report something on their credit report, which is extremely difficult to do nowadays. In 2017, they passed the eviction masking law that pretty much states, and for those of you that aren't familiar with this law, don't shoot the messenger, but it pretty much states that if the landlord prevails within 60 days of filing the case, then the eviction shows on the tenant's credit report. Anything that goes over 60 days means it doesn't show. So let's play this out. Guy lives in a house. I serve him a notice. He doesn't get out. I file the lawsuit. He gets served with the lawsuit. He gets scared. He runs. He has an eviction on his credit. He vacated. Hit the easy button. Okay, he's gone. The person that stays in the property and throws every demur, motion to quash, and all the motions, drags this out, we go to trial, their record's sealed. Eviction isn't going to show. It went over 60 days. So the good guy that runs when he gets scared, okay, and is like, I don't want an eviction, I'm out of here, he's going to get the eviction. And the person that rakes you over the coals, they're not. We're not a country of communists, but damn, some of these rules just don't make any sense. Okay. Entire agreement, basically they're saying that this entire agreement constitutes the written agreement constitutes any oral agreement. So that's what that means. Estoppel certificate for those of you that are sales agents, brokers, buying, selling property. When it's tenant occupied, an estoppel certificate is how you get the tenant to tell you how much their rent and the deposit is. A lot of times we're telling them that they have to fill those out, and they do. Can't force it, but it becomes challenging, but it talks about estoppel. This is where I want your attention again. We're on number 31. This is your toxic substance warning notice. So in this paragraph, they're basically doing your toxic chemicals that can cause cancer. You know what I'm talking about? So that disclosure is in here. Also your mold and mildew warning notice. Take note, you really want that in your contract because it talks about how the tenant, unreported tenant caused damage. In other words, the sink was leaking. They never opened the under the sink. They didn't tell you, now it's all full of mold. That's most likely how you're going to charge them back the expenses to mitigate the mold, is because they didn't notice the water leak. So big thing here, you guys, that mold and mildew warning notice, huge for us, okay? Also goes on to the Department of Justice. Just know that they're talking about Megan's Law disclosures there. And I know there was another one, just the Department of Justice. Oh, and then they have an expiration, holdover, and death notice. I'm going to make this really simple. If you didn't give the notice to the tenant that you're not renewing, and mind you, right now in COVID, you can't, okay? So in normal times, non-COVID, we could give a notice of non-renewal, meaning they have to get out at the end of their lease term. This is where it's telling them that they have to get out. Also, it explains to them about holdover damages if they're holding over, and it talks a little bit about a death in a unit or a death on the property or even a death at the hospital and your tenant's now dead. Here's what I could tell you about that without getting into too much detail and cause any problems. Just because the tenant died doesn't mean the rental agreement does. Okay? It is now assumed by the estate of the dead tenant. In the event that you have a death in the unit, do not try to figure it out. Do not give anyone a key. Don't talk to anybody. Call your legal counsel. Okay? There's a lot of moving parts that come in with a death, whether it be in the unit or at the hospital. And it has to be handled with precision and accuracy, because a mistake there could land you in handcuffs, for lack of a better term. So you want to be really careful, especially with giving keys out or allowing possession. And let me just say this, and please follow along. Ralphie dies in your property. He's been there forever, 84 years old. The daughter came and said, hey, I don't know if you know, but my dad passed away. I need the key so I can go in and clean out his unit so that we can give you a vacant unit. So you give them the key so they can do that, because we all see vacant unit. We want money. Okay, get out. I get it. Then his wife shows up. You didn't even know he had one. And says, I'm here to collect my husband's valuables. Can I have the key, please? And you're like, okay, you don't want to be aiding and abetting in a crime, helping someone gain access to a unit. So take that key, lock it up, don't give it to anybody, okay? Until you have direction from your legal counsel, who's going to point you in the direction of the coroner's office to get the next of kin so that you can notify them and talk to them and make things happen. But as simply as I could say this, don't give a key to anybody, don't promise anybody anything, take in a bunch of information and tell them you'll get back to them. One of my favorite fogging techniques is, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'll let my supervisor know and get back to you. You can also use that with, I'll let my business partner know, I'll let so-and-so know. They don't have to know if there's no partner, that's none of their business. But it gives you time to get the correct answer so that you're not putting yourself in a position that's going to cause you financial strife. Okay? Everybody got that? If you have a death in a unit, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Call your attorney. Keep it simple. Kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. I know. Just kiss it on away. But I'm telling you, we deal a lot with that here at the law firm. And when somebody passes away, emotions run high. And people want to get mementos, souvenirs. They want that person back. We've all lost somebody, and we know what that feels like. So sometimes their intentions aren't necessarily wrongdoing. And then you have the ones that want everything. Oh, I want uncle's car. I want uncle's this. I want that. I want this. So you got to be careful with that. The rules between a senior care facility and everywhere else are a little bit different. So again, don't do anything. Call your legal counsel, get direction from them so that you're not making yourself susceptible to a lawsuit or handcuffs. Just saying. I don't look good in orange. Don't know about the rest of you. Hold on, I saw a question come through. And we're almost done, you guys. You have several elderly tenants. Keep current with their to notify in case of emergency. Sometimes that's helpful. And just remember, don't give a key to anyone. If granddaughter shows up and says, I used my key, let myself in and cleared out the unit, want to let you know we're gone, here's the keys. Just say, okay, thank you, I'll call my legal counsel. You didn't promise her anything. All you did was take the key. If she already had a key and you didn't give it to her, then the tenant did. That's not a you problem. Hit the easy button, okay? Just saying. So and every death is different. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm trying to be honest with you. I get several phone calls where one day, and I will never forget this, I pick up the phone, hi, this is Patty, how can I help you? And I hear clacking, which is high heels running on cement. We know the sound. And I don't know why this person's running. I look at my caller ID. I see that it's a major property management company, and I know the on-site manager. So I pick up the phone and I'm like, are you okay? And she starts screaming, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So what do I tell her? I can't see what she's doing. I don't know what's going on. So I'm yelling in the phone, run, run, run as fast as you can. I don't know what she's running from, but this girl is running, okay? So I hear a door slam and she says, okay, I'm in my office. I'm in my office. And I'm like, what's going on? Do we need to call the police? She's like, we need to call the police. There's a dead body on the couch. There's a dead body on the couch. I saw a dead body on the couch. And I'm like, okay, it's not going to chase you. You're okay. So sometimes I can't see what's going on. I just get to hear all of what's going on. But yeah, I didn't know why she was running. Scary. And then I get other ones that are like, hey, Patty, yes, this info is technical, and that's what I'm trying to put in your head. Some things you can handle, some things you can't. Okay. When it comes to a death in a unit, call your attorney. Do not try to figure this out. Okay. It is above your pay grade. It is above mine. Okay, got it? Err on the side of caution. Don't give anybody a key. Tell them, thank you for bringing to my attention that you'd like to get a key. Let me call my legal counsel. What we're going to tell you is call the coroner's office and have them tell you who the next of kin is, and then we'll start that process and see who the next of kin is legally, because that's who you get to talk to. And remember, they died. Their rental agreement didn't. The estate now assumes that. So it can be really tricky. The odds equal 100%. The odds of what? Someone dying in your unit? Yeah, unfortunately, people die every day. Had somebody call me one day and they're like, hi, Patty, how's it going? Very casual. I'm like, hey, how's it going? She's all, well, I'm standing here at the property and I'm looking in the window. The curtains are wide open and I can see my tenant's naked on the couch and he's dead. And I'm like, okay, you might want to call the law enforcement, paramedics, things like that. And then call me back if you need further instruction. We'll go talk to one of the attorneys for you. You never know how it's going to affect you or somebody else. I can give you a tip, and please pay attention to me. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of them. If you have tenants in a property and they're asking for additional trash cans, maybe they have additional tenants. Just saying, they usually go hand in hand together. Okay, might be a good time for you to go do an interior inspection. If you have a smell complaint, chances are you're looking for something dead, whether it be a critter or a human. I can't answer that. But usually when you have a smell complaint, you're looking for something dead. Yeah, I don't want to get into a whole bunch of details on a death in a unit because that is a whole nother class. What are the odds that it'll bite the landlord in the butt having a death in the unit? The odds are high. Why? Because everybody else's emotions are high and they all want mementos. They all want souvenirs. They all want that person back. Or they need to dispose of a body. You guys are so funny. Okay, so let's get on to the last page and then we're going to be done with this, I promise. Default. In the event that the renter breaches this lease, owners shall be allowed at owner's discretion, but not by way of limitation, to exercise any and all remedies to provide the owner by California Civil Code Section 1951.2 and 1951.4 damages the owner may recover to include the worth of time at the award of the amount on which by the unpaid rent and balance of the term after the time of the award or any shorter period is specified by the lease agreement exceeds such amount of rental loss for the same period the tenants could be reasonably avoided. What does all this mean? This has to do with damages when you're allocating your security deposit at the end, not only with physical damages like replacing carpet, paint, and things like that, but also the monetary, like an eviction cost or an unpaid water bill or trash bill that's left behind. These are how you're able to get reimbursed for those and charge those. Also, number 33 says local city addendums. You need to know if you have special rules in your city. City of Fontana has an unruly gathering ordinance. So if you're in Fontana, you need to notify them of the city's restriction regarding the unruly gathering ordinance. Just saying. Premises availability. If the premises are not vacated by the current renter and all personal property removed therefrom by the, that should say start, not state. Okay, it's a typo, and yes, I've notified AGLA. It should say start date. Either the renter or the owner may terminate this agreement with a written notice to the other. All deposits for payments of other charges by the renter to the owner shall be refunded, except for the payment for verification of credit, and neither renter nor owner shall have any further liability to the other. What is this about, Patty, and what does this mean? This means for those owners that have a tenant that said, hey, I'm moving out, I'll be out on the 1st, and they re-rent it to someone else and they have them sign a written rental agreement, you need this clause, okay? Because if tenant A that is supposed to be out on the 1st doesn't leave, you have 2 tenants with a written rental agreement. Technically, you need to provide housing to both of them, meaning one of them you may have to pay to put into a hotel, because the first one held over. How can the second one move in? They can't. So This is what protects you and allows you to terminate the contract with the person that was going to move in and give them their deposit back, rather than having to put them in a hotel until tenant A leaves. Make sense? Hope that clicked, because that's really important. And then we have Assembly Bill 1482. This has to do with the statewide rent control initiative. You guys need to be disclosing in your rental contracts if you're exempt, or if they have rent control, or if it's 15 years old, when it will be susceptible to the statewide rent control initiative. Other provisions, I'm going to talk about this briefly just because I want to put it in your head, but I don't want to take a 3-hour webinar, you guys. I'm sorry, but this is an important one. I had an owner once. She had additional addenda, meaning she had an addendum for each room in the house. Only clean the stainless steel sinks with the stainless steel counter cleaner. You can't use sticky back shelving paper. You can't hang anything on the property. You can't put any nails in the walls. She had all these rules of what they couldn't do. Okay, you with me? It clearly stated, do not set any hot pans on the countertop because it could burn it. When you start writing other rules, I'm telling you, the way your lease is written so broadly in such broad terms, it covers everything. Okay? It's written broadly in very broad terms, so it umbrellas and covers everything. That's what you want. When you make an addendum that says you have to use special cleaner and you have to do this and you can't set anything hot on the countertop, you are rewriting your lease so it has less power, and now your addendum is more restrictive, so it's going to control. Okay, and you might have forgot something when you wrote that addendum. So when you wrote, no, you don't put anything hot on the counter, it could burn the counter. You didn't write, don't set it on the linoleum floor. So now they burned a cookie sheet size hole in the floor, but you're going to have a hard time enforcing it because your addendum didn't say anything about the flooring. It only said don't set hot pans on the counter. So when you want to go through and write additional addenda, here's what you need to know. You could be hurting yourself. Your lease may cover that in an umbrella type way where it talks about damages and how a tenant's responsible for all damages to the unit by them or their guests. That's a blanket, it covers everything. When you start making your own rules and getting more specific, you're voiding the rules of your written contract and making the more restrictions stand. So if you forget something, you leave something out, or you do something that isn't legal, they could strike that whole thing, and now what do you got? Okay, so as nicely as I could say this, don't try to rewrite terms. Don't write in there that the tenant is responsible for plumbing expenses for $75. Anything after $75 falls on the owner, because who's responsible to provide habitable premises and maintain the plumbing? You are. You are. So just by putting that in there makes you look bad to a judge. It makes it look like you don't know what you're doing. We don't want to attract attention to us, especially in a courtroom, okay? Just saying. Sometimes once that judge paints a picture with you, every time you see that judge going forward, he knows who you are and he's going to go look for the errors he knows you make. Don't feed them that, okay? So be very careful what you put on as additional addenda. It can harm you more than it can help you. You want to make sure you get assistance from your legal counsel, okay? I'm going to end this soon, you guys. So same thing applies for house rules. Yeah, be careful what's in those. All of my rental agreements are on AOA forms. Is it illegal to change this to a 10-page AGLA rental agreement? I have 6 units. The last tenant that vacated was 9 years ago. I have some old AOA forms. One has been there for 25 years. Okay, here's what I'm going to tell you. If the tenant signs and agrees to it, then everybody signed and agreed. You want to do like or similar terms if you're trying to get them on a new contract and not throw any changes in there. If Senate Bill 91 happens tomorrow, you're not going to be able to do any increases, any additional costs. So if when they moved in, they didn't pay for water and trash, and now you want to add that, you're not going to be able to until that Senate expires. So again, err on the side of caution until we know how the law is going to play out for the next couple of days, and then ask me. I'll find out from our legal counsel and we'll go from there. But right now, I want you guys to err on the side of caution. Keep things functioning as best you can and don't rock the apple cart. I saw another one. What kind of things do you put in addendums? I have a list. You may put submetering in addendums. You may, yes, I will be doing a class on the new bill once it passes. If I did a class on subjective what's at legislation right now, you guys' heads would explode and we wouldn't get anywhere. I like to wait for it to become law before I really start talking about it, because then I have the law to reference versus he may sign it, he may not sign it. They could modify it again, which is all true. So I'd rather just wait until it passes, take that law, and then tell you guys what that means in simple English, if that makes sense. Different addenda. Submetering or rubs is something that I would have an additional addenda for. Also, the spare the air addendum, political sign. Here, water economy was in a drought. Really hard if the tenant watered on the wrong day and got a fine from code enforcement. It was really hard for us to charge that fee, that fine back to the tenant because we never disclosed to him what the law was regarding odd and even days. So I always put something in there regarding water conservation. So if that ever happens again, we're protected. Also, you could do a laundry addendum if you have a laundry room on hours of operation, how it's to be worked, if somebody else's laundry's in there, swimming pool rules, storage rules, CC&Rs, okay? If you're in an HOA and you expect the tenant to follow the HOA guidelines, if you never gave them a copy of the CC&Rs, how are you gonna pass the fines on to them? You gotta tell them what the rules are before you punish them for breaking the rules. Make sense? So you want to make sure they get a copy of the CC&Rs if you're in an HOA or something along those lines so that you can enforce that. We talked about handwriting notes on the written agreement. I talked to you about how too much of your own handwritten addenda can hurt you. And I wrote my own addendum with the help of legal counsel about 15 years ago, and I still use it to this day. It's called Animals Indigenous to the Area. Basically, I'm disclosing to you that if you're living here in this desert environment, we have animals that are indigenous to this area. They were here first and this is their home. They may become a pest, they may become a nuisance, they may cause you strife. You need to be aware that there's wild animals in this area. Example, high desert property, Victorville. Tenant moves in, 3 days later, dog gets bit by a rattlesnake and dies. I never disclosed that there was animals indigenous to the area there. I never disclosed that a rattlesnake could come through the chain link fence and bite and kill their dog. Talk about being exposed. It's just something else I did. We can't control what coyotes, bobcats, we can't control what the neighbor's damn dog does for that matter, but I'm just saying we can't control raccoons, possums. They could get in their car and rip the guts out of their car. I mean, they could do anything. So I, with my legal counsel, wrote an addendum for animals indigenous to the area, making them aware that they could become a pest, a nuisance, but to remember they were here first, use caution when approaching them, contact animal control if they had a problem. So it was just my way of helping to protect myself. So it is something that I add to my rental criteria for my properties that are in the desert. I don't know that I necessarily use that at the beach because now we're talking about potentially a raccoon or two, mostly a possum problem, right? We're not talking about bobcats, mountain lions. We need to make sure we're disclosing that there's animals that are indigenous, meaning they were here way before we were, to this area, and you could come into account with them. Use caution. So it's just me and mice. I'd be more concerned about warning them about the two-legged neighbors. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All right, you guys, I didn't mean to take 2.5 hours of your day. This is a very important subject, as you can see, and understanding those terms and putting them in simple terms we can all understand and relate to sometimes helps, especially when we're reading some of the legal language that's in these contracts and we have no idea what it means. So if nobody has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and end this for today and we'll go from there. But mice are just there. Can I just hire you to draw up my next agreement? Actually, you can. You can. It's a new service I'm going to be offering where I will help you with that kind of thing. Yes, I would be more than happy to, actually. Did everybody learn something today? I'm just curious. Do you want more classes like this? April says yes, where we go into depth and into detail. And everybody now understands what that attorney's fees clause means, I'm sure, and also what that waiver clause means. Very important that you have those in your contract and that you understand that if you lose, you're going to pay them that much money. So be careful what you put there. I'm glad to see. Let me know what kind of classes you guys want to see in the future, because I'd like to do a big class like this at the end of every month. Why did I pick the end of the month? Because the end of the month, we tend to be less busy than we are at the beginning of the month. Just saying. What do I know? All right, if you guys need anything, have any questions, hunt me down. I see all your thank yous and I couldn't do this without you guys. Oh my goodness, there's a big long list from Jackie. California is number one again. We have Rescue California, 50, worst record of vaccines distributed, highest homeless population, highest taxes, worst governor. Trying to keep my mouth shut. Wait till you see what's about to happen. You think all this other stuff is bad? Just wait. Just wait. Okay. Jackie, I'm going to do you a solid and I'm going to tell you something. Will you have access to this conference for parts missed? Yes, absolutely. Jackie, please stay on. I'm going to tell you something before we get off of here. Yes, Hootie will send a link to you guys so that you can watch the replay. Okay. Thank you guys. If you want to hear what I have to say, please listen. If you don't want to hear what I have to say about this potential bill that hasn't passed yet, because that's what I'm going to talk about. And I'm just going to make one statement that you can all think about. I'm trying to choose my words carefully. This AB 91, I'm sorry, it's SB, Senate bill. It's not an assembly bill, it's a Senate bill. So Senate Bill 91 is what is most likely going to pass. The other one that we have is AB 15. Thank you, Heidi. Hear me out. If this passes tomorrow, Senate Bill number 91, the way that it's written currently, and it could be amended. That's why I don't want you to put too much thought about it. Thank you, you guys. You guys rock. I couldn't do this without you. How do I say this? There's a term in here that basically says we're not going to be able to evict for cause anymore. We're only going to be able to evict for non-payment of rent. The rent isn't due until June. Okay. Follow me, and you won't be able to bring forth an eviction until you can provide proof that you applied for the state's relief program. You know, the $4.2 billion where they want to give you 80% of the rents owed and have you forgive 20%. And they're going to pay you for that. I'm going to tell you guys right now, if you get involved with the city program, a state program, a county program, any of those programs, read the fine print on the documents, because I guarantee you it says in there that you cannot evict your tenant for 12 months, 16 months, 24 months. Read it. If you accept those funds, you may not be able to evict your tenant for the next year or 2 years going forward. The way I'm reading this bill, and I have lots of questions for the attorney later this afternoon, is in the event the tenant doesn't pay when they're supposed to pay, and you want to do an eviction based on non-payment of rent, which they are allowing per this bill once the rent is due, you can't file an eviction until you've applied for the state funds. Why? Why do you want us dependent on you, the government? You're telling me I can't evict my tenant until I apply for your state funds, but once I take funds, I can't evict my tenant for a year or 2 years going forward? Don't get me started. Don't get me started. You won't like it. It gets bad. I have a mouth. I own property. It just, I thought we were the land of the free, the home of the brave. Why does this sound like communism? Do yourself a favor. Go read Senate Bill 91. You want to see Patty mad? I'm like a little blonde tornado girl. No, you don't. You really don't want to see me mad if you're my tenant. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Go read Senate Bill 91. A lot of it you're not going to understand. A lot of it isn't going to apply to you. I mean, there's new disclosures we have to provide with specific language. It also controls of putting past due rents on our dispositions of security deposits, saying if it's COVID rent, it can't go on a disposition of security deposit. Yeah. The planetary alignment is shifting. And the way that we've done business for 20 years is changing. That's a nice way I could say it. Go read Senate Bill 91. And then if that doesn't get your blood boiling, go read AB 15. That's enough to make you throw up in your mouth. Yes, they are doing more than peeing in the pool, honey. They're crapping in it. And I don't want to be in the pool. Here's something to remember, you guys, just so that we all understand. We are not all on the same boat. Some of us are in canoes. Some of us are in kayaks. Some of us are currently sinking. Some of us are on yachts and cruise ships. We're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. Some of us are suffering worse than others. Some of us are at a higher risk of losing our investment property because we've expanded our resources. We're all in the same storm, but we're not on the same boat, okay? Just try to remember that when you're dealing with your tenant. There's 10 to 15% of the tenants, in my opinion, that genuinely have a need. We need to help them. The other percentage of them are going to manipulate the system and use it to their advantage because they're the gimme generation, if you will, or the entitlement generation, or just because they can generation. Remember this, just because you can doesn't mean you should. We have to be ethical. Yeah, I'm picking my words very carefully, very carefully. We'll see what happens here within the next day. We should know by tomorrow. Okay, you guys have a great, great day. If you guys need me, you know how to find me. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or text me. And I would be more than happy to answer questions, deal with problems, put you in contact with legal counsel if that's what you need. Remember that Fast Evict does do free legal right over the phone. So if you have questions, concerns, that is a resource you can always use. They are attorney owned and operated. It is not a typing service. They are a law firm, been in business since the 70s. And didn't realize they would sound like a typing firm going forward. But when you've been in business for over 30 years, you kind of want to not change your name. So Fast Eviction Service, like I said, is a full service law firm, full service collection agency as well. So we are here to help you in the event that you need our assistance and would be more than happy to do that. Anybody else? Have a great day. Have a great weekend. We'll see what happens tomorrow. And we should do another webinar for Wednesdays with Widget, which will go into detail about the new law, unless it's something that we need to address sooner rather than later. Thanks, you guys. Have a good one.